If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
C21. This was the kingdom of shadow. The place was shrouded in darkness and gloom, the shadows almost palpable in the oppressive and suffocating atmosphere. Despite the eerie ambience, it was also alluring and mysterious. However, Shirou was not interested in exploring this mystery at the moment. He had been beaten and bruised, and had died 21 times. He lay on the ground, feeling like a dead fish, and had no desire to get up. The woman who had inexplicably invaded his dream and killed him 21 times was now squatting next to him, tickling his nose with a flower. Achoo! Shirou sneezed. Looks like you've recovered, the woman said in a gentle tone, throwing the flower away and standing up. Let's get up and continue. However, this gentle tone sounded like a devil to Shirou. What a joke! He exclaimed. I haven't recovered yet. I don't want to get up. Shirou grabbed the grass on the ground with both hands and refused to get up, no matter what. If he got up, he would definitely be tortured by this woman again. I've never taught such a disobedient disciple before, the woman laughed softly, showing no sign of anger, and spoke in a gentle tone, like an older sister next door. I never said I wanted to be your disciple. Shirou looked up at the woman's beautiful face and couldn't help but smile wryly. The woman stood before Shirou, her striking figure commanding attention. Her straight, waist-length purple hair flowed like a waterfall of lavender, cascading down her curvaceous body, which was accentuated by her revealing purple-black leather armor. In her hands, she held two bright red short spears, their pointed tips glinting menacingly. But it was her eyes that truly captivated Shirou, a pair of striking red orbs that seemed to pierce into his very soul. Shirou wryly thought to himself that this woman must be the mistress of the land of shadows in Celtic mythology, Scathatch. A woman who had lived from the time of the gods until now. But how could this woman appear in the real world? Why did she suddenly appear in his dream? And to top it off, she started talking about teaching him and then proceeded to violently attack and kill him 21 times. Fortunately, it was just a dream, or else he would have really died. How did you enter my dream, Shishao? Shirou asked, his frustration palpable. He had hoped to leave Fuyuki City in just 2 days and escape the Fourth Holy Grail War, and he had even managed to change Sakura's fate while preserving his own life. He should have been able to sleep soundly, shouldn't he? But instead, this woman had entered his dream and beaten him up for no reason. Shishao? Is that how people in your time address their mentor? Scathatch blinked in surprise before smiling gently. But I don't mind it. No. That was just pure terminology. Shirou knew that this was all wrong. Scathatch was clearly a violent person in disguise as a beautiful girl. How else could she have so easily killed a cute 6-year-old boy 21 times? Entering your dream is quite simple, Scathatch laughed charmingly, her voice gentle and soothing, like a breeze. It's a type of magic you're not familiar with. If you're well rested, then rise and continue training with me, Scathatch urged. Shirou had a bitter expression on his face. I'm just a child, please let me go. Fighting has nothing to do with age, Scathatch laughed. But I'm just a small bird, Shishao. It's better for you to find other experts, Shirou said bitterly. The feeling of being killed again and again was a great punishment for Shirou, who just wanted to survive. That won't do. I've already made a promise to someone else. Breaking a promise is not my habit. Most importantly, I really want to personally educate this unique being that I've never seen before, Scathatch said with a slightly strange smile. The excited light that flashed in her gentle, red eyes made Shirou feel afraid, especially when she mentioned education. But Shirou noticed one thing. You made a promise to someone else? Someone asked you to enter my dream? He asked, staring at Scathatch. Yes, Scathatch nodded. Who? Shirou asked, wanting to know which jerk had called Scathatch to ruin his good dream. It was strange, after all. Anyone who could ask Scathatch to do something must also be a mythical killer. And in this era, those mythical killers were either taken away by Gaia and Alea as black workers or hidden in the inner world. The only ones who could manifest were the 7 servants summoned through the Holy Grail. Who could ask the immortal Scathatch to do such a thing? Most importantly, Shirou shouldn't know anyone who could do such a thing. Scathatch thought for a moment before giving her own evaluation of the person. He's a completely self-centered, quite foul-mouthed guy. As long as it makes him happy, he would probably even do something as terrible as destroying humanity. However, I don't hate him, she said. Why does this description sound so familiar? Master, do you know about the Fourth Holy Grail War that occurred in Fuyuki City? Shirou inquired cautiously. Is the person I'm thinking of, a self-centered, foul-mouthed individual, a participant in this war? Yes, Scathatch replied with a light smile. Shirou made a bitter face. It really is Mr. Gold? But how did Mr. Gold become a good citizen? Before he helped Sakura with her problem, now he pulled Scathatch into the dream to teach him. Your origin is a sword, and he was originally looking for someone who wields a sword, Scathatch explained, raising the spear in her hand. However, he has poor social skills and doesn't know many people, so naturally, no one was willing to listen to him. Now, get up or I'll attack. Wait. I have one more question, Shirou interjected. What do you mean when you say I have a special body? Is there some hidden power within me? A special power? Scathatch hesitated, a rare look of troubled thought crossing her face. I'm not sure how to explain it. I've never encountered someone like you with this kind of unusual body, so I can't provide a detailed description. What do you mean? Shirou asked, focusing intently. All transmigrators have some kind of golden finger, right? Could it be that he has some kind of golden finger too, but just hasn't noticed it yet? It's really hard to describe this sudden and contradictory sensation, Scathatch said, trying to find the right words. It's like a reader of a hero's biography entering the hero's story. At first, you're just an average person, barely worthy of a supporting role or even a name because of the hero. But then, you feel a sudden desire to compete for the role of hero yourself. What? Shirou asked, taken aback by Scathatch's confusing explanation. To put it simply, Scathatch began, taking a moment to think, it's like the feeling of an audience member who is watching someone else's story, shedding their own tears, but then suddenly barging onto the stage of the story themselves. Shirou's heart skipped a beat. Could this deep meaning reveal that he was a transmigrator? A spectator who should be sitting in the audience suddenly barging onto the hero's stage. I wonder what kind of performance that would be. That might also be one of the reasons why he is so interested in you. But as for me, I initially came because he asked me and it was hard to refuse. Now, I simply want to see what path you will take, Scathatch said with a smile. Is this explanation satisfactory? Your explanation is satisfactory, but even if I am just a spectator who has barged onto the hero's stage, I have no intention of performing in this hero's drama, Before Shirou could finish speaking, Scathatch bent down and placed her index finger over his mouth, smiling. Once you're on stage, it's not so easy to get off. Plus, you've been targeted by that very troublesome individual, and if you try to leave the stage before giving a satisfying conclusion that pleases him, you'll probably be chased all over the world by him when he gets angry. Leaving one city, or even one country is just the beginning of the chase. You have to think carefully, because that guy is extremely willful and stubborn. Shirou stammered, understanding what Scathatch was saying. She was talking about using the opportunity to leave Fuyuki City and escape the Fourth Holy Grail War. The most likely outcome is probably that he catches up to you and kills you on the way, Scathatch said with a smile, stating the cruel reality. An unworthy person like me has been targeted by the king. Shirou wore a bitter smile. He is just such a self-centered individual. So, do you understand your current situation? Scathatch asked with a smile. I understand completely, Shirou nodded. Scathatch slightly smiled and clenched the two spears in her hands. So, Shirou hugged Scathatch's leg and looked up at her pleadingly. Dear Scathatch-Nisan, please be my servant. At Chapter 22, C22. With a pain-filled cry, Shirou was kicked out of the dream. Scathatch, who acted like a big sister to him, didn't get angry when he made the rude request. Instead, she simply smiled and refused. In her words, you really are a pitiable child. But even though I really want to help you, unfortunately, I cannot manifest in the physical world. And then under the pretext of training, Scathatch subjected Shirou to a brutal beating, hammering his body until it was as tough as iron. In total, she killed him 41 times before finally, just as dawn was breaking, she kicked him out with a swift kick to the butt. Violence. It was a truly violent experience. Shirou really wants to cry. Despite her gentle exterior, Tosakas' true nature was that of a terrifying demon of violence. But that's not even the worst part. The thing that truly made Shirou's head throb was the realization that he was being watched by that tax thief maniac. No wonder that guy was so willing to provide information to Shirou and come to his aid when he was about to be killed by Spartacus. It was because Shirou had become the object of amusement for Mr. Gold. Could this be the result of his luck, which was almost as good as Lancer's E? Shirou couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Big brother, did I keep you from getting a good night's sleep last night?" Sakura asked guiltily. She had held on to Shirou throughout the night and thought that might be the reason for his lack of rest. "No, Sakura, you're worrying too much. Let's get out of bed, wash up, brush our teeth, and have breakfast," Shirou said, pulling back the blankets. "Okay." Sakura nodded. After they washed up, Shirou and Sakura went downstairs to find that Mrs. Fujimaru had already prepared breakfast, which included a poached egg and milk. "Hey, we are not having sandwiches today?" Shirou asked curiously. "I watched a health program last night, and the expert said it's not good to eat greasy food in the morning," Mrs. Fujimaru said with a smile, clearly pleased that she had gained some new health knowledge. Shirou knew that his mom liked to watch those domestic care programs on a daily basis. In an effort to be a competent housewife, this tough and detail-oriented mother was also working very hard. "Oh, right, Shirou. Your dad said he'll be off work in 2 days. Do you have any place you'd like to go and play?" Mrs. Fujimura asked. "No," Shirou shook his head. "What about you, Sakura? Do you have any place you'd like to go?" Mrs. Fujimura asked, turning to Sakura. "No, Aunt Cho," Sakura answered politely. "Oh dear. That's a problem. Where should our family go on vacation? Abroad is too expensive, and going to a nearby city doesn't have the feeling of novelty," Mrs. Fujimura said, looking a bit troubled. It seemed that she, being lively and energetic, wanted to go out and play. It was a reminder that even as adults, the desire to have fun and relax is still present. "It's just that." Shirou laughed bitterly. Originally, he had planned a family vacation to avoid the Fourth Holy Grail War, but because of Mr. Gold, he had to put it on hold. At the very least, he can't go out with the Fujimaru family, otherwise, as his mentor said, that extremely self-centered Chiyunibiu will surely bomb the transportation vehicle they're riding in. Reality can be really funny. Originally, he just wanted to be an ordinary wealthy man, but in the end, he was still dragged into the War of Magi. He had wanted to avoid the Fourth Holy Grail War, but in the end, he was drawn in deeper and deeper, until now, when there's no way to avoid it. However, things also have two sides. If that Chiyunibiu hadn't seen Shirou as an object of amusement, Shirou might have already died at Spartacus' hands. And now, Shirou has to consider how to face this Holy Grail War. Fujimaru Narita hung up the phone with a tired expression and leaned back in his chair. He glanced at the photo frame on the table, which contained a picture of him and his family. Fujimaru picked up the frame and looked at it for a moment before smiling and setting it back down. "Keep up the hard work," he encouraged himself as he stood up and stretched. He then retrieved some real estate documents from his desk drawer. Just then, a colleague called out, "Narita, someone is looking for you." "Looking for me?" Fujimaru wondered. "Who is it?" Narita trailed behind his colleague, curious as to who could be seeking him out. When he laid eyes on the man, he was taken aback by his appearance. The man was decked out in a luxurious red suit and carried a staff adorned with sparkling jewels, exuding an air of Western aristocracy. His neatly groomed beard and poised demeanor only added to the image of an elegant gentleman. Narita couldn't shake the feeling of unease as he wondered what a person of such high standing could possibly want with him, a small-time real estate agent. He cautiously approached the man and inquired, "Excuse me, may I ask who you are?" "Hello, Mr. Fujimaru. My name is Tosaka Tokiomi and I am Sakura's biological father," the man said with a smile. He glanced at Narita's hands and noticed that he had no charms on them. Narita's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Sakura. "Excuse me, Mr. Tosaka, but may I ask what brings you to me?" "I heard that my daughter, Sakura, has been staying with you, Mr. Fujimaru." "That must be quite a burden for you," Tokiomi said with a graceful smile. Sakura had a charm from him that made it easy for him to locate her, and he had learned last night that Sakura had been brought home by Shirou. "Oh, no, it's no burden at all, Mr. Tosaka." "You're too kind," Narita said, waving his hands and adopting a humble posture. As a small-time salaryman, he knew he was no match for someone as influential as Tosaka in the city of Fuyuki. I also heard that you and your family were planning a trip, is that correct? Tokiomi asked. Yes, Mr. Tosaka, you have excellent information. But please rest assured, we have no intention of taking Sakura with us. In fact, I tried to bring her back to your house yesterday, but it was already late. And as you know, Fuyuki hasn't been very peaceful lately. Narita said. In his view, Tosaka had come to reclaim Sakura. No. Mr. Fujimaru, you seem to have misunderstood. The reason I came here was to ask you to take Sakura on your trip. Tokiomi said. Ah. Fujimaru Narita was momentarily confused. Tokiomi gave a slight smile. After the confrontation with the Mata family last night, Tokiomi had come to understand the Mata family's situation and why Sakura was so rebellious. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail War has already started, making it difficult for Tokiomi to send Sakura to Finland at this time. Instead, he decides it would be best to have the Fujimaru family take Sakura on a trip to avoid the conflict of the war. Here is a token of my sincerity. I hope you will accept it, Mr. Fujimaru, Tokiomi said as he handed Fujimaru Narita a stack of bills. Oh, this is too much, Mr. Tosaka. Fujimaru Narita exclaimed, flustered. Please, there's no need to be so formal. My only wish is for my daughter to have a happy trip, Tokiomi replied with an elegant smile. In addition, there is one more thing I would like to ask Mr. Fujimaru, Tokiomi said, his expression becoming somewhat serious. Yes, Mr. Tosaka? What is it? Fujimaru Narita inquired. As he spoke, Tokiomi's eyes lit up slightly, and he used suggestion on Fujimaru Narita. Raising his arm, he revealed the seals on his skin and asked, is there anyone in your family with this mark? Yes. Fujimaru Narita answered, with a dazed expression. Who? Tokiomi pressed for an answer. My 6-year-old son. Fujimaru Narita answered mechanically. So that's how it is. Tokiomi nodded to himself, deep in thought. Could it be that there really is a problem with the Holy Grail? For a child to become a master? Well, this is one less opponent to worry about. But was the person in the black cloak last night that child's servant? The aura is somewhat different from a normal servant's. As he came to this conclusion, Tokiomi lifted the suggestion and said to Fujimaru Narita, who had returned to normal, in that case, I entrust my daughter to you, Mr. Fujimaru. In exchange, I will also take good care of your son. Ah, is that so? Thank you, Mr. Tosaka. There is one more thing, please don't tell my daughter about this. Understood, Mr. Tosaka. Fujimaru Narita, unaware of the manipulation, was overjoyed at the prospect. From a normal, ordinary person's perspective, this could be seen as the Fujimaru and Tosaka families forming a relationship, which would certainly be beneficial for their future prospects. However, it is unfortunate that this is the thinking of a normal, ordinary person, rather than the truth of the situation. To a magus, the way of thinking of a normal, ordinary person is abnormal, and to a normal, ordinary person, the way of thinking of a magus is also abnormal. Fujimaru Narita would definitely not think that the care mentioned by Tokiomi was not the care he thought it was, but rather. Chapter 23, C23. Night. Fujimaru Narita returned home and announced the great news that the contract had been signed, allowing the family to begin making preparations for their trip in earnest. Fujimaru Narita was delighted at the opportunity to spend time with his family. Fujimaru-cho was also pleased, looking forward to a break from her household responsibilities. Sakura, unconsciously influenced by the joy of the Fujimaru couple, was happy as well. However, Shirou, upon learning of the news, was unable to feel happy. If he had been informed the day before, Shirou might have already been dancing with joy. However, this news arrived one day too late. What's the matter, Shirou? Weren't you begging to leave Fuyuki City every day? Why are you wearing such a sour expression? Mrs. Fujimaru asked, puzzled. Nothing, I'm very happy, dear mother, Shirou forced a smile and tried to conceal his inner unrest and fear. That's better, Mrs. Fujimaru said, patting Shirou's shoulder cheerfully. She didn't notice the subtle changes in Shirou's demeanor. The entire family happily discussed their travel plans, and Shirou, not wanting to dampen their mood, forced a smile and joined in the discussion. However, he knew deep down that he would not be able to go on the trip. Fate was cruel, as he now had to participate in the war that he had been avoiding all this time, or else that completely self-centered Chiyunibiu might take the lives of his entire family. The night was completely dark, it was time to go to sleep. Today, Sakura finally summoned the courage to take the first step in her new life and slept in her own room for the first time. It was a shame that the soft, fluffy pillow was no longer there, but it was for the better. He knew that he would sweat profusely while fighting the old purple-haired woman in his dreams and didn't want to risk drenching Sakura's clothes, so he accepted this arrangement. In 1993, the world had few entertainment options, so Shirou quickly fell asleep. As soon as he was asleep, Scathatch arrived as expected. She held 2 spears and without saying a word, prepared to commit domestic violence against Shirou. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. My dear Shishao, wait a minute. Shirou called out quickly. What's wrong? Scathatch stopped and looked at Shirou with curiosity. Well, can you still contact Mr. Gold? Shirou asked cautiously. Mr. Gold. Scathatch paused, then reacted and smiled gently. You mean that foul-mouthed guy? Shirou nodded hurriedly. Yes, I can. What's wrong? Scathatch asked. I won't run away or hide anymore. I just want to send my family out of Fuyuki city first. Can you help me ask if that's okay? Why don't you ask him yourself? He's in the same city as you, Scathatch asked. Fuyuki city is too big. I won't be able to find him, Shirou replied. And he doesn't want to meet that guy, Shirou thought to himself. Poor child, all right, I'll help you ask him, Scathatch said gently. Shirou's eyes lit up and he said with a face full of grievance, My beautiful sister Skadek-Nisan, you know the pitifulness of a child as well. Why don't you become my servant and save the poor child? In response, Shirou was met with a spear that directly pierced his head, as well as a gentle voice, I also want to, but I can't. The world now doesn't have the foundation for me to materialize. Besides, your teacher taught you to never let your guard down, especially towards beautiful women, Scathatch added. After being killed 56 times by Scathatch, Shirou collapsed in the dream world, his face tired and overwhelmed. Your spirit is almost at its limit. If you keep getting killed, it may not hold out and you could suffer from an internal injury, Scathatch said as she found a place to sit down. Then, have I made progress? Shirou asked, exhausted. How to say it, not at all, Scathatch shook her head and for the first time, her delicate, fairy-like face showed a somewhat troubled expression. I've never seen a disciple as hard to teach as you before. Given that I've been holding back significantly, even my worst disciples would be able to fight back when it reached around 10th rounds. It may sound harsh, but you are the first person I've encountered who, despite almost 100 attempts, is still unable to withstand a single hit from me. Is it possible for you to hold back even more? My reaction time can't match up to your speed at all. Unfortunately, I can't hold back any further. I've already reduced my strength to a minimum. If I hold back any more, it would be like standing still and allowing you to defeat me. Scathatch shook her head and smiled gently. This is a difficult reality to accept. Shirou laughed bitterly. But don't be too discouraged. As someone who has lived for a long time, I've seen many late bloomers who improve dramatically over time. It's not that your eyes and reaction speed can't keep up, but rather that you simply haven't adapted yet. So, keep working hard, my weakest disciple. Scathatch laughed. But the war that will claim my life is coming soon. Shirou sat up and had a sudden crooked thought, quickly asking, by the way, how old? Before he could finish his crooked thought, Scathatch threw the spear in her hand, likely using all her strength. The spear passed through Shirou's bangs and exploded with a thunderous roar behind him in an indescribable way. Boom! The explosion's fire illuminated Shirou's stunned face. Scathatch pointed the spear at Shirou, her tone apologetic, oh, sorry, my hand slipped. She did it on purpose. She definitely did it on purpose. Shirou was so shocked by the attack that he felt like he might wet himself. He felt like he would have died from it in a dream too. Furthermore, even with such a gentle tone, she can't hide the fact that she's holding a spear and the look on her face as if she wants to kill him. Scary. So scary. It's so scary when Scathatch, who's like a big sister, gets angry. Skadek-Nisan, who is young, beautiful and cute as a flower, must be very tired from teaching this disciple. Let me rub your shoulders and massage your legs to help you relax. Swallowing nervously, Shirou quickly stood up and put on a flattering smile, approaching Scathatch from behind and starting to rub her shoulders. Despite being such a violent female Tyrannosaurus, her body is surprisingly soft and tender. As he gently tapped Tosakas' back from behind, Shirou couldn't help but glance at the woman's ample chest before quickly looking away. He knew that only the strong were allowed to possess beauty, and he saw himself as nothing more than a sparrow struggling to survive. Survival was all that mattered to him. Besides, once he scrapes through the Fourth Holy Grail War and rides the internet's popularity to become a wealthy man, he can go and support some pretty girl of this era or something. Shirou, what does Nasan mean? Scathatch asked with a smile. Is that how young women are addressed in your time? It sounds a bit strange, but I kind of like it. Pfft. Chapter 24, C24. After being coaxed into a good mood, Scathatch ended the dream, causing Shirou to wake up and find that he was wet again. In the dream, Shirou was killed 56 times by Scathatch, and the tension and excitement of life and death caused his adrenaline to surge, leading to his entire bed being soaked with sweat. Fortunately, Shirou did not sleep with Sakura the previous night, otherwise he would likely have been misunderstood as wetting the bed, which would have been very embarrassing. On this day, Mr. Fujimaru, who had completed the contract, had to go to the company first to hand over his work to his colleagues before he could take a complete vacation. Mrs. Fujimaru, on the other hand, wanted to consult with Shirou and Sakura about where to go and decided to purchase food for the trip. After all, buying things at tourist attractions can be several times more expensive, and it is a housewife's duty to make the trip as economical as possible. However, Shirou couldn't get excited about it. Facing the rapidly approaching Fourth Holy Grail War, Shirou must make an effort to preserve his own life. Yes, he had learned from Scathatch that the Fourth Holy Grail War had already started, and only the final 2 servants were on their way. So they will be here in 2 or 3 days. Shirou did not know, but this was indeed the last day he could prepare for the Holy Grail War. The 3 families had prepared for the war for 60 years, and the other participants also prepared for at least half a year, but he, the unlucky one, had less than 3 days of preparation time. No. Had he planned on participating from the start, he would have had at least a month to prepare. But as he had always wanted to avoid it, he was left with only 3 days to get ready. Isn't this also a form of unforeseen punishment? The clown, who had hoped to break free from the script written by the goddess of fate, is ultimately punished by the goddess. While Sakura and Mrs. Fujimaru went to the department store to buy snacks for the trip, Shirou stayed home, drawing up his own battle plans on paper with a pen. In his previous life as one of the world's 450 million urban youth, Shirou, like many of his peers, was known for his focus on career planning. Therefore, whenever he set out to do something, he always liked to make a list of his plans first. Despite this, Shirou didn't rush through the process of writing his plan. Instead, he first took the time to recall the general events of the Fourth Holy Grail War, and then systematically listed and analyzed them one by one. The only uncertainty he faced was not knowing when the timeline had been disrupted, leading to a chain of butterfly effects. Initially, it was Sakura who had run away from home, and then he replaced the role of Castor in place of Gilda Rice. Since Sakura was not passed down to the Mata family, Mata Korea was not altered, which in turn prevented him from participating in the war as a combatant. Additionally, Berserker was not Lancelot, but rather Spartacus. Did the other servants change as well? Shirou didn't know this, and could only consider the worst-case scenario. If both the characters and plot have changed, then I really don't stand a chance of winning at all. Shirou sighed, feeling a headache coming on. The only person he could be sure of was Archer Gilgamesh, whom he had seen in person. He had no way of knowing if anyone else had changed. He also had no understanding of how the butterfly effect had come into play. If the servants and even the masters had undergone complete transformations, he knew he would be in deep trouble. Shirou knew he was not as strong as others, and he couldn't outmaneuver them with strategic thinking. His only advantage lay in his familiarity with the plot and character setting. If even that was taken away from him, then his best option would be to enjoy himself by eating and drinking well, and then wash his neck clean and wait to be slaughtered. Shirou sighed with worry. At night, with Mrs. Fujimaru's advice, they decided to go on a trip to Hokkaido for fun. Everyone was very happy, and Shirou didn't want to ruin the mood, so he forced himself to put on a happy smile. As Mr. Fujimaru had said, boys are different from men. Men have things that they must protect. Shirou knew he was a man now too. Shirou entered the land of shadow in his dreams again at night. While Scathatch killed him 57 times, she also brought him a message. The jerk with the Chiyunibiu syndrome had agreed to Shirou's request and allowed him to send his family away before coming back to fight. Upon hearing this, Shirou finally let out a sigh of relief and praised the guy for showing some humanity. But when he came back to his senses, Shirou sadly realized that even though he had been oppressed by the guy with Chiyunibiu syndrome, he still had to praise the other guy's humanity. Is it really true that reducing some of the oppression would make the oppressed person happy? It seems that Spartacus's classification of him as an oppressed person is not without reason. However, Shirou also breathed a sigh of relief. Misfortune does not extend to one's family is not necessarily true in the context of a Magus battle, especially for a self-proclaimed hero of justice who will do anything to achieve their idea of justice. Before dawn, when he was thrown out by Scathatch, Shirou hugged Scathika's legs and begged with great emotion, "Shisho, my dear Shisho, please materialize and become my servant." This was the third time that Shirou begged for help from Scathatch, and it could be considered akin to making 3 visits to a temple in the hopes of receiving a blessing. One might wonder if Scathatch will finally agree to Shirou's request this time. Can't materialize? What a joke! If she can't materialize, how did she appear in FGO? Did she crawl out with her head? Despite Shirou's persistent pleading, Scathatch remained firm and shook her head, smiling. She said, "There is no way. I would love to fight alongside the heroes of that era, but it is simply not possible." If an ordinary servant were bugged by Shirou's repeated pleading, they might feel a little annoyed, even if they didn't hate him. However, Scathika's tone remained gentle and patient, despite this being the third time Shirou had begged her for help. But in that gentle tone, there was still a sense of refusal. "Besides, I haven't abandoned you. Am I not helping you train now?" Scathatch smiled, trying to reassure Shirou. "Is this really helpful?" Shirou asked, raising his head to look at her. "Of course it is," Scathatch replied, nodding. "It has reduced the level of ugliness in your death from extremely ugly to just very ugly. That's definitely progress." Shirou's face was covered in tears as he realized that Scathik Nisan has changed. She is no longer the understanding and gentle Nisan, but has become sarcastic. Despite the sarcastic tone, what Scathatch said was true. Shirou was just an ordinary person from the 21st century who had never fought or killed anyone. He was a member of the largest group of ordinary people, with no experience in combat. What is the point of a few days of training when there are mythical murderers who have been stabbing people with knives since they were children? Furthermore, how many of those mythical murderers are not the embodiment of their legend? How many so-called heroes, especially Western heroes, are not given strength and magical artifacts by gods, dragons, elves, and other unimaginable fantasy creatures? How much time did these heroes spend training and fighting on the battlefield? Given this, what chance does an ordinary modern person, who has only trained for a few days and whose body has not even reached puberty yet, stand against murderers who have been killing people since they were young and who possess various superpowers? Additionally, what is the definition of an ordinary person? Is it the reader who cries while reading someone else's story, or the salaried worker who feels trapped by life? Is it realistic to think that a group of people like this, who have only trained for a few days, could stand a chance against murderers who have been killing people since they were young and who possess various superpowers? It's a dead end. Shirou bitterly laughed to himself. "Don't be so pessimistic," Scathatch said with a smile, pointing to Shirou's forehead with her slender fingers. "Haven't you noticed that you have an advantage that is stronger and more advantageous than anyone else, even that smelly guy, or even me?" Shirou looked bewildered. "I do? Do I have something like that?" "Yes, I originally wanted you to discover it on your own," Scathatch replied, her lips curling slightly to reveal a smile like a ray of winter sunshine. "But you, my weakest disciple, are too stupid. If I don't remind you, I'm afraid you'll go and die with this kind of self-abasing thought." "Shisho, what is it?" Shirou asked urgently, staring at Scathika's pretty face. "Remember this," Scathatch said with a smile. "No matter how detailed modern knowledge the Holy Grail gives to servants, it cannot change the fact that they are ancient people, and their knowledge and cognition cannot be harmoniously unified. However, the Holy Grail War happens in your city, in your time, and the masters are often conservative magicians." "In my time." Shirou repeated those words, his eyes suddenly lighting up as he realized his greatest advantage. "Thank you, Shisho. he said sincerely. You're welcome, Scathatch replied with a smile. As a teacher, it is only natural to give some advice to a troubled disciple. But I still want you to materialize as my servant. Shirou pouted and said. Unfortunately, that is not possible, Scathatch replied, her smile still gentle. All right, the door to the dream world has been opened. You can go out on your own now. Shirou nodded and turned towards the open door to the dream world. Oh, right. Scathaka's voice came from behind him. Has the young lady changed her mind? Shirou quickly turned around to look at Scathatch and saw that she had a gentle smile on her face. She said, the way you act spoiled towards me, although embarrassing, I don't hate it. Spoiled? I'm not spoiled. Shirou said in a fit of embarrassment as he walked out of the dream world. Behind him, he could hear Scathaka's gentle laughter. Chapter 25, C25. It could be said that Scathatch, who has lived from the age of gods to the present, is truly worthy of her title as the legendary warrior. With just a small suggestion, Shirou was able to instantly grasp his core advantage. Or maybe this is the wisdom of Dun Scath at play. Scathaka's words are very accurate. Those servants are all ghosts from the past, and although the Holy Grail has granted them with modern knowledge, their ancient ways of life and understanding make it difficult for them to fully assimilate into modern society. There is a discrepancy between their knowledge and cognitive level. This is also true for the masters who are modern people but still hold conservative views as magus. The only one who fully utilizes modern knowledge is the envoy of justice, Kiritsugu. However, compared to his expertise in modern weapons, his knowledge of modern ways of life is probably not very extensive. Therefore, Shirou, coming from 2019, has more modern knowledge than anyone else among the participants, and this is also his greatest and most essential advantage. Based on this, Shirou has come up with a series of plans and has carefully calculated them one by one. It seems that he truly believes he stands a chance. Oh, if he could just get his hands on some Gatling guns, RPGs, and the like, that would be even better. It would be even better if he had a few tanks and fighter planes at his disposal. But this seems to touch on the territory of mystery, and it appears that this kind of thing is taboo and cannot be done either. Still, there is no other choice, so he will have to think in this direction. To survive, he doesn't care about any tricks. He will use whatever tricks he can think of. However, before he can do that, he must first determine how much the selection of participants in this Holy Grail War has changed. October 4, 1993, 9:24 am. The Fujimaru family boarded the underground train bound for Hokkaido, a small territory with a total area of about 380,000 square kilometers. The train ride took 3 hours, but once they arrived, they could easily travel to any part of Hokkaido within a day by train. In the afternoon, Fujimaru Narita arranged a guest house, and following a suggestion from Shirou, the Fujimaru family and Sakura ignored his absence. Shirou lowered his head and said, "Have fun." He grabbed some money and the house key from his father's bag, then set off towards his own death battle. Fuyuki City. It was 9:23 p.m. when Shirou stepped on this land again. As he returned to this land, Shirou's heart was filled with tension, hesitation, and fear, a stark contrast to his feelings when he had left with his family. In the next half-month or even less time, this place could very well become his graveyard. Shirou wrapped himself in his blue coat, taking a deep breath. Winter was coming, and tonight's Fuyuki City was 1 degree colder than usual. As Shirou walked towards his house in Shinto, the sound of complaining voices caught his attention. "Stupid, stupid, stupid. How dense can you be? Do you want to be the death of me? I'm your master. And you are my servant. You should follow my commands. Got it." Shirou stopped in his tracks and turned to see a red-haired man in armor and a black-haired young man engaged in a heated argument in the garden nearby. The red-haired man was imposing, standing at an imposing height of 1.9 meters with intimidating, bulging arms. In contrast, the young man was slender and had a fragile appearance. Normally, the young man wouldn't dare to provoke the huge man due to their significant size difference. However, it seemed that the young man was fearless, pointing at the red-haired man and cursing him without fear of being attacked. This was, of course, because they were participants in the Holy Grail War. The young man was the master, Waver Velvet, a typical young man with a high ego and low practical ability, but he would later become one of the lords of the Clock Tower. The red-haired giant was the famous conqueror King Iskandar. Shirou quickly checked to make sure he had gloves on and that his Saint Graph was still turned off. With a somber expression, he lowered his head and thought about taking a different path. Just as he turned to leave, a large hand came down on his shoulder and a commanding voice spoke from behind him, "Wait, child." Oh no! Shirou's body instinctively trembled as he turned around to face the voice. He double-checked that he had not fused with his Saint Graph and was still wearing gloves before looking up at Iskandar, who was holding his shoulder, with a timid expression. Uncle, is there something you need from me?" "Ah! You scared the child." Iskandar hadn't even spoken yet and Waver had already started yelling. Then he gave Shirou a friendly smile and said, "Don't be afraid, little friend. We're not bad people." I'm not afraid. Please don't recognize me as a master, please don't recognize me as a master." Shirou secretly prayed in his heart. Iskandar reached out his hand and snapped his fingers on Waver's forehead, causing Waver to cry out in pain. He then lowered his head slightly and gave Shirou a friendly smile. "Young one, do you know where one can easily acquire knowledge?" It seems he didn't recognize me. Shirou felt relieved. It seemed not everyone had the bug eyesight like Gilgamesh. This was truly good news. "To obtain knowledge, you can go to school," Shirou answered without hesitation in a childlike tone. "Uncle, do you want to go to school?" Iskandar asked. "Besides school, where is the place where you can obtain the most knowledge?" "The library," Shirou answered. "There are so many books there." "Where is the library?" "Over there," Shirou pointed to a street not far away. "The largest building." Iskandar chuckled. What a well-behaved child. He then turned to Waver. Waver's face was full of caution as he asked, "What do you want?" "Naturally, I want to give a reward." Iskandar smiled and reached into Waver's pocket to take out some money, which he then handed to Shirou. Waver also had a smile on his face, but he was pissed. This guy didn't even ask him and just took money from his pocket. "Use it to buy candy to eat," Iskandar said. "Oh. Thank you, uncle." Shirou stuffed the money into his pocket and turned to leave. Not far away, he immediately heard a loud shout from Waver Velvet, "That's my money. You took my money as a reward. You stupid servant, did you get my permission? I am the master. You have to listen to me." Stupid servant. That was close, however, one group has already been confirmed. Rider group, unchanged. Shirou's eyes lit up slightly and he touched his pocket. Additional war funds were obtained. Shirou returned home and that night he did not go to meet Scathatch in his dreams but instead sorted through the information he had. Chapter 26, C26. A scapegoat. Shirou understood that in order to conceal his identity as a master, he needed a substitute master or scapegoat to serve as a decoy so he can disguise himself as caster. This will solve one of his problems, but despite this realization, deep down he still desired to have another scapegoat take his place as a servant, yet he knew there was no way to make it happen. The distinctive aura of servants is easily recognizable, it's the same with his unique aura brought by his Saint Graph. But this is only when he was activating it. This is why Matazukan initially failed to see through him as a servant, underestimating him and ultimately resulting in defeat. However, when considering someone to act as a substitute, Shirou couldn't bring himself to use an innocent person as a sacrifice. After much contemplation, he could only choose someone who is extremely nefarious. Thus, the only viable option was Uryu Unosuke, who still roams free as a murderer. Trying to enter the deadly whirlwind of the Holy Grail War and then attempting to escape from it. Impossible. Ryu Unosuke is simply elusive and difficult to capture. The only thing for certain is that this individual is still in Fuyuki City. However, it is of little concern as he is no match for Shirou. Even someone like Ryu Unosuke, who managed to evade justice in the technologically limited 1990s, would not be able to evade capture in today's world of nationwide surveillance cameras, instant internet access, and DNA tracking technology. It is sufficient to demonstrate to him the true meaning of justice in a harmonious society. And with his mastery of Magecraft, Shirou now possesses the ability to match the technological advancements of 2019. There is a basic form of Magecraft known as search, which uses a strand of hair from the targeted individual to locate their whereabouts. Even though Shirou may not be aware of this particular Magecraft, it is ingrained in the spiritual foundation of Emiya. The range of the search is determined by the amount of magical energy used in the Magecraft. Shirou's magical attribute is at a level of C, which is sufficient to use the search Magecraft to locate Ryu Unosuke within Fuyuki City. However, this Magecraft is only effective against ordinary individuals, as a true magus has many ways to counter it. Fortunately, as Ryu Unosuke has not yet summoned his servant, he remains an ordinary person and thus, can be easily found by Shirou using this Magecraft. With a well-constructed plan in place, Shirou visited the police station at dawn and used suggestion to obtain a strand of hair found at the scene of Ryu Unosuke's kidnapping. Utilizing this strand of hair, he spent 3 hours tracking down Ryu Unosuke, who was hiding in a small, dilapidated house in Shinto and on the brink of starvation. Upon seeing Shirou, Ryu Unosuke was perplexed. Shirou then employed a powerful form of suggestion to hypnotize him into believing that he was a master. Shirou brought him to a relatively secluded tattoo shop in Shinto. Using suggestion again to influence the tattoo artist, the artist followed Shirou's instructions and tattooed command seals onto Ryu Unosuke's right hand. Shirou had previously considered using tattoos to conceal the seals, but it was not feasible with his parent around, as suggestion can be easily undone when there is a lack of consistency between the brain's cognition and reality. Furthermore, as a mother, Mrs. Fujimaru would not have been pleased to see her son getting tattooed. The idea did not come to him later when he was trying to escape Fuyuki City. At this point, these elaborate actions are no longer necessary, as it would be more advantageous to create a master and have them sacrifice themselves instead. Ultimately, the tattoo artist makes a living with their skills, and the tattoo on Ryu Unosuke's hand looks very realistic and like a true command seals just by looking at it. After the tattoo was completed, Shirou used suggestion again to make the artist forget about this incident. He also did not pay him, not because he wanted to avoid paying, but because doing so would create an inconsistency with reality and could cause the artist to have doubts, which might break the suggestion and increase the chance of this matter being exposed. Despite the small chance of it happening, Shirou knew that in the midst of a death battle, every precaution must be taken. With that in mind, he made a mental note to pay the bill after the war was over. The tattoo served as a symbol of Ryu Unosuke's new role as a master, and he couldn't wait to see what the future held for them. It was ironic that Ryu Unosuke had pulled Shirou into the deathly vortex of the Holy Grail War, and now, because of Shirou, Ryu Unosuke too was caught in its grasp. Perhaps this was what the Buddhists would refer to as karma? The two of them were now entwined in a fate that neither of them had chosen, but it was too late to turn back now. Shirou knew that he couldn't return home. As he was now a participant in the Holy Grail War, his own house was not a safe option, as it would put his family in danger if he were targeted by other masters. The house, which he and his family had worked hard to purchase and were still paying off a mortgage on, would be at risk of being destroyed in the war, causing not only the loss of property but also potential financial ruin and mental stress for his parents. He needed to find a new base to operate from, one that would keep his family out of harm's way. With the ongoing war, Shirou understood the importance of having a safe and secure base of operations. After much searching, he eventually came across a cheap rental home that belonged to Ryu Unosuke. Though the house was in a state of disrepair, it offered the perfect solution. The standalone house, isolated from the rest of the city, would not put innocent civilians at risk during battles. Determined to make it suitable for his needs, Shirou used his E-ranked ability, fortification construction, to make a few simple renovations to the rental home, giving it the necessary security and fortification to serve as their base during the Holy Grail War. The Saint Graph was truly remarkable, there was no denying that. Despite having no prior knowledge of Magecraft, the moment Shirou fused with it, an understanding of fortification construction flooded into his mind. This allowed him to complete the renovation of the rental house with ease. Though the E-rank skill was only for simple modifications, it still provided a level of protection against magic, which was certainly better than nothing. After finishing the renovation of the rental home, Shirou turned his attention to creating an item that could aid him in protecting innocent people. Using his caster's skill, item creation E, he crafted a bracelet which he then gave to Ryu Unosuke, sealing suggestion into it. The bracelet would constantly suggest to Ryu Unosuke that he is a participant in the Holy Grail War and a good person, thus preventing him from causing harm to anyone during the war. Once the bracelet was prepared, Shirou moved on to his next task, using his projection to bring forth a variety of materials, then using his item creation E again, he crafted a transparent film with a powerful magical aura. This film was then affixed to the back of Ryu Unosuke's right hand, where the command seal's tattoo was located. Yes, the transparent film that Shirou created was infused with a significant amount of magical energy, acting as a source of magic that would aid in concealing the fact that Ryu Unosuke was just a normal person. It was designed to fool other magi into thinking that Ryunosuke possessed magical abilities of his own. If the transparent film that Shirou created did not have the desired effect, he would have to accept that fact and move on. He had already exhausted all of his own ideas and wisdom based on his current level of understanding. His last resort was to do his best, and then leave the rest to fate. As Shirou sat on a bench, he glanced once again at his attributes panel, which displayed mostly E-ranked attributes. A feeling of faint sadness washed over him as he realized the limitations of his abilities. He knew that these attributes would only allow him to bully magi but would not be enough to defeat a servant. Furthermore, the servant aura emanating from his saint graph when he uses its abilities made it impossible for him to disguise himself as a master. Everything he was doing was out of necessity and not by choice, it was all forced by helplessness. In this situation, all he could do was give his best effort and leave the outcome to fate. As Shirou scrutinized his attributes, something caught his attention and he stared at it, wide-eyed in shock. Among his inherent skills, he noticed a new one that had been added. Why is there an additional skill in my inherent skills? Chapter 27, C27. The Wisdom of Mortals D. We are not the chosen ones, but we are the masters of our own fate. Praise those who are good to us, and destroy those who are against us. What the hell? How did an inherent skill suddenly appear? Shirou couldn't help but be surprised as he examined his attribute panel, a feature brought about by the Holy Grail. It analyzed his body's condition and formed data that could be easily understood by the brain. However, he remembered that when he first fused with the Saint Graph, all of his inherent skills were inherited from Emiya. Now, there was an inexplicable additional skill. Could this be a cheat? Shirou wondered to himself. Spartacus' attack had nearly incapacitated his left arm, reminding him of the harsh reality that transmigrants, like himself, were not special, they were simply surviving in a different place. However, the appearance of this new skill couldn't help but spark fantastical thoughts in Shirou's mind. He thought of the online transmigration novels he had read before, where the protagonist starts off with cheats, becomes a bully and the female lead falls in love with him even after he kills her whole family. He remembered how exciting he found these novels in middle school, but later realized how toxic they were. But the thought of it might be happening to him, filled him with excitement. However, this Wisdom of Mortals skill was just a D rank and did not seem to be very impressive. The most pressing question now was, what practical use does this skill have? Shirou was perplexed. He didn't possess Gilgamesh's powerful skills, clairvoyance and Shanakba Imuru, nor did he have Merlin's vast knowledge, so he was unable to understand the purpose of this skill. But it didn't matter, he still had a dependable teacher by his side. With that, Shirou quickly lay down on his bed and prepared to reach out to Scapegoat. She was truly a great teacher, always available no matter the time of day or night. Whenever he fell asleep, she would appear in his dream on time, just like a high school homeroom teacher. Hold on, Shisho. Shirou called out as Scathatch once again raised her spears, ready to pierce his body. No waiting, let me poke a few holes first. Although she said something so willful, Scathaka's intention was only to scare Shirou, and she was still quite gentle. She lowered her weapon and adopted a listening posture, ready to hear her student's question. Shirou, now at ease, shared his doubts with Scathatch. Isn't it obvious? Scathatch leaned forward, her small face bearing a smile as she looked at Shirou. What do you mean? Shirou replied with a look of confusion. The Holy Grail uses magic to gather data on the servant, and presents it in a format that your brain can comprehend. You should be able to understand the specifics of this skill, Scathatch explained. But I still don't understand it. It just says Wisdom of Mortals. How am I supposed to understand it? Is it just mocking me as a mortal? That can't be right. Can you, my dear Shisho, explain its purpose to me? Is it for amplifying strength, enhancing strategy? Or like your Wisdom of Dun Scaith, does it allow for mastery of nearly all skills? Shirou asked eagerly. Scathatch let out a chuckle before shifting the conversation. Shirou, do you know who makes up the largest population in the world? Obviously, it's normal people, Shirou replied without hesitation. And what about the role of normal people on the stage of heroes? Scathatch continued, not giving Shirou a chance to respond. It's to be saved by heroes, to be killed by heroes, and to be led by heroes. In history and biographies, we hardly find any mention of normal people, they are referred to only in general terms like villagers, soldiers, or farmers. The wisdom of mortals is just that, mortal wisdom. So what kind of blessings do you think it holds? Scathatch said, musing on the topic. So, it's actually useless? Just a cruel irony that I, a mortal, have stumbled upon the stage of heroes? Oh, I can feel the deep malice from the Holy Grail. Shirou exclaimed, sounding defeated. Also, how did this happen? I don't recall having this inherent skill before, Shirou queried, seeking answers. Who knows? You don't know, Shisho. Shirou said, looking surprised. I am not omniscient, Scathatch replied with a gentle smile. Well, I should have expected this. I'll just have to accept it. I'm going back now, Shirou said, taking a deep breath and trying to steady his mind. Leaving so soon? Have you forgotten something, my weakest disciple? Scathatch said, narrowing her eyes and raising the spear in her hand. Please, have mercy. I still need to prepare for the upcoming Holy Grail War, Shirou quickly begged, gesturing with his hand. If it had been any other heroic spirit, they would have ignored Shirou's plea, but Scathatch was known to be gentle. She nodded and said, all right, but with this truancy, the next lesson will be doubled next time. I understand, Shirou said, flustered as he quickly escaped through the door of the dream. What an irritable disciple. If he had waited any longer, I might have let slip some information, Scathatch chuckled. The wisdom of mortals, the wisdom of humanity. Heroes and great people may lead mortals, but it's always mortals who make history. It is truly mortals who can make heroes shine, and it's also mortals who can bury heroes in history forever. Scathatch laughed gently, she almost slipped up just now, but managed to hold back in time. She has already graduated from this world, it's better for her to keep her mouth shut around students who are still studying in this world. Otherwise, if she directly gave the answers, it would be too disrespectful for those students who are still in the process of learning and would deprive them of the opportunity to think and grow. In fact, after giving Shirou a reminder last time, Scathatch has deeply reflected on herself and realized that this way she deprived Shirou of the opportunity to think and grow on his own. But, despite everything, I still feel compelled to remind my foolish disciple, Scathatch said with a laugh. However, her expression then became one of confusion and concern. But why does Shirou possess something like this? I thought his Saint Graph did not have this kind of thing. Could it be because of his unique body that it has undergone a change? Even Scathatch, who possesses the wisdom of Dunscath, occasionally encounters things she cannot understand. But she found it acceptable. It means her foolish disciple is carving his own path. The woman known as Shisho by her disciple showed a slight smile of satisfaction. Awakened from the dream, Shirou stretched his body and checked the time. It was 3:27 in the afternoon. This was good, it was not yet nightfall, so he could confidently make some preparations. As he walked down the street, Shirou noticed that despite it being October, the weather had already become quite cold. But he realized that the indifference between people was even colder than the weather, like a cold wind blowing in from Siberia. But, even so, there were still many kind-hearted citizens in the city. As he walked not far from the park, Shirou saw a man in a black coat climb to the top of a large tree, pluck a red balloon, and then give it to a little girl who was waiting expectantly by the tree. Thank you, uncle, the little girl said, taking the balloon and showing a bright smile. You're welcome, the man in the black coat replied, avoiding physical contact with the little girl, perhaps because he feared that his own impurities would tarnish the child's purity. He was a kind and warm-hearted uncle. But when Shirou saw the man in the black coat, he shuddered as if he had been electrified, his expression stiffening. He was certain of it, there was no mistake. The man who had committed atrocities in the name of righteousness. Kiritsugu, a man who firmly believed in his own righteousness but ultimately was betrayed by it. Shirou lowered his head, his face laced with anger as walked away. He knew that Kiritsugu's presence in Fuyuki city meant that the Holy Grail War was getting closer, and he feared that it would begin tonight. He had to hurry. Shirou returned to his home and from under the bed in his room, he retrieved the Ultraman outfit. Shirou had obtained this Ultraman suit by taking a large sum of money from Fujimaru Chiyo's pouch without her permission. Taking money without permission is considered as a bad behavior, similar to stealing. But for the sake of survival, he can't let these things weigh on his mind anymore. Besides, though his body may be young, his soul is mature and adult, and taking money cannot be considered as stealing, it's just borrowing. After obtaining the suit, Shirou put on the blue contact lenses and went to a hair salon where he used suggestion to get black hair for free. He then returned to his base, put on the elevator shoes and the Ultraman suit. Looking at himself in the mirror, Shirou laughed bitterly. He knew that if everything went according to plan, he would have to wear this suit around for at least 7 days in order to avoid exposing his true identity. The Fate/Stay Night clearly states that a Holy Grail War lasts for 7 nights. However, in reality, the duration of the war may vary depending on the situation. He donned his trusty black cloak, enveloping his entire body. With a bitter smile, he acknowledged that his preparation time before the war was far too brief. Being a novice magus and still just a child, he had no connections and no one to provide him with information. He could only rely on himself. Given his limited abilities, he knew that his options were limited. He thought to himself, perhaps I should go to the Ryuadu temple and pray to Buddha? I've heard that the temple is home to a person adept at fooling people, maybe he could say something that would help me feel more at ease. Shirou considered the idea, but ultimately rejected it with a bitter smile. Not only was he an atheist, but he had never burned incense or worshipped Buddha before. Even if there were deities or Buddha in this world, it was unlikely that they would pay attention to an ordinary person like himself, who only sought their help when in need. Furthermore, the presence of the Greater Grail beneath the Ryuadu temple made it an unwise choice for him to go there. So, what his future holds is uncertain. Whether he will live or die, whether he will survive, it all depends on how he adapts to the situation in the war. Despite the overwhelming odds of defeat that weighed heavily on him, the advice given to him by Skathatch had given Shirou, an ordinary modern person, a chance to emerge victorious. He was determined to use all of his wisdom as an ordinary person to seize that chance to survive. However, I really don't want to have to work hard, I want to win without putting in effort, Skathakne. He let out a sigh and felt disheartened. But what could he do? Skathatch simply smiled and refused his request. Being lazy was also one of the worst qualities an ordinary person could possess. Chapter 28, C28. With time still on his side, Shirou compiles a list of information he already knows. First, the Matu family is headed by Byakuya, and their servant is Spartacus. The command seals have already been used twice, and Spartacus sees himself as the protector of the weak. Second, the Tosaka family is still led by Tokiomi with Gilgamesh as their servant. He already knows Shirou's identity, but it is unclear how he feels about him. The alliance status of Kaire Kotomine with Tokiomi is uncertain and Shirou is uncertain about whether his servant is Hassan of the 100 Faces or not. Third, Emiya Kiritsugu has already appeared in Fuyuki city. The status of his command seals has not been confirmed, it is unknown whether he is the master of Einsburn or not, and the identity of his servant is also unknown. Fourth, besides Waver and Iskandar who have been observed and confirmed, the identities of the masters and servants of the other groups have not been confirmed, everything remains unknown. Fifth, the demi-servant occupying the role of caster, has a different aura and combat power from that of a normal servant, it is best to avoid direct combat as much as possible. His fake master is Ryu Unosuk and he can use Ryu Unosuk's death as temporary concealment when things get bad. Sixth, whether the course of the Fourth Holy Grail War will follow the plot of Fate/Zero is still uncertain. Seventh, the reason for the change in the timeline is currently unknown, and the cause of the butterfly effect is also unknown. Shirou, with a better understanding of his situation, realized the importance of confirming if the other groups have undergone changes as well. He lifted his head slightly to glance out the window at the setting sun and sighed. Suddenly, his body jolted violently, like a mouse encountering a rat, he trembled. Shirou stood up abruptly, his eyes locked onto the distant buildings. This aura, he muttered, recognizing the same feeling he had encountered not long ago with a heroic spirit. Without a doubt, this aura belonged to a servant. As servants can sense the aura of other servants, Shirou, who had absorbed the Saint Graph and become a demi-servant, was able to detect this aura as well. Shirou thought to himself, has it begun already? My death war. Shirou smiled bitterly, despite being prepared, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease in his heart. Don't fuse with the Saint Graph yet, he thought, go and take a look. Investigate and confirm how much change has occurred in the participating groups. With that in mind, he put on black gloves, a leather suit, and wrapped himself in a black cloak. 3 layers of disguise. Shirou left the room and crept through the twilight. He knew that Skathatch had sharp eyes, and without her reminder of his biggest core advantage, he would have given up and waited for death. But now, knowing he still had a chance of victory, he wouldn't give up without a fight. If he could survive, why would he want to die? Shirou discovered the source of the servant's aura in the waterfront park of the Shinto district in Fuyuki City. Though it seemed to align with the direction of Fate/Zero, he did not dare to let his guard down, for human arrogance is often the precursor to foolishness. As he searched for the aura, he found its source to be a man. The man was dressed in blue leather armor and held red and yellow spears. Without taping into the Saint Graph, the distance was too far for Shirou to see the man's face clearly with his normal eyesight. But with such distinctive clothing, Shirou, being a worthy fan, recognized the man as the Irish Fionn Knight, Diarmuid Uaduabaitni, the leader of the heroic warriors in Celtic mythology. A man with two spears. Shirou realizes that he cannot engage in a direct confrontation with this man, as his attributes, with the exception of their shared tragic fate of having bottom-tier luck, far surpass his own, particularly his A&level agility. However, one thing that can be confirmed is that the person who appeared as Lancer is indeed Diarmuid Uaduabaitni. This raises the question, is his master still Lord El Meloy? Shirou is uncertain but decides to not reveal himself and certainly not to fuse with a Saint Graph, as doing so would reveal his position and make him a target for elimination by Diarmuid. To engage in a fight against Diarmuid, who has an average attribute of around B level, with Shirou's line of E attributes would be a suicide mission. However, if Diarmuid is here, it is highly likely that the warehouse battle of Fate/Zero can be reenacted. This would provide an excellent opportunity for Shirou to observe and collect information, as the warehouse battle on the dock was the first group appearance of the Fourth Holy Grail War. Additionally, with Caster replaced by him, and Berserker in the open, it would be an opportunity to gain valuable knowledge. As time passed, the fiery sunset on the horizon eventually set, and the dark night enveloped the land. Diarmuid's servant aura became stronger, it was even detectable to Shirou, a mortal who had never participated in any battles, and could sense the provocation in it. It was clear that Diarmuid was trying to lure other servants to reveal themselves. Shirou didn't care whether the other participants would be tempted by Diarmuid's provocation or not. However, he knew for certain that he would not reveal himself under any circumstances. No matter who the servants are in this Holy Grail War, he knew that he could not defeat any of them, not even the weakest attribute assassin, as his own attributes were a row of E. The only chance he would have is to bully weaker masters like Waver. As time passed by, two female figures came into view in the distance. One of the women was dressed in high-end white fur autumn clothes, with snow-white hair, giving her the appearance of a snow elf. The other was a blonde girl, dressed in a blue dress with armor, her hand empty, but it seemed as though she was holding an invisible sword. Upon seeing these two women, Shirou breathed a sigh of relief. The presence of the Saber group confirms that they have not been affected by the butterfly effect of the timeline. Without seeing the command seals, it is impossible to confirm whether the master is Emiya Kiritsugu or Irisveil von Einsborn, but the servant is confirmed to be Artoria. As Shirou looked at the poster girl of the Fate series, Artoria, he didn't feel the excitement of a fan, instead, he felt a sense of relief. Indeed, for mortals, compared to the poster girl he once fought for, life is the most precious thing. Are you the one who emitted the aura and challenged me? Yes, I am. From your stance, I assume you are Saber. Perhaps. But, from the appearance of your dual spears, you are undoubtedly Lancer. It's pointless to hide it, your grip on the invisible weapon has already revealed that you are Saber. As a knight, not being able to reveal my name is regrettable. But, let us begin, Saber. Across time and space, for our own honor and desires, let us decide the outcome. That is my intention. Artoria launched an attack against Diarmuid without hesitation. The two fought fiercely. Shirou, who was concealed nearby, silently calculated. He had no interest in watching the intense battle between the two, as without the fusion with the Saint Graph, his eyes were just those of an ordinary 6-year-old boy, unable to keep up with the fast-paced offense and defense, making it pointless to watch. The identities of all the servants, except for the assassin, have been confirmed either directly or indirectly. It appears that the butterfly effect, which has hastened the timeline, has only impacted Caster and Berserker. Chapter 29, C29. The river, which is in close proximity to the sea, features the Fuyuki Bridge, a 665-meter-long majestic arch bridge that spans the river and connects the Shinto district to the Miyama district. The arch of the bridge is at least 50 meters high, and standing on top of it would be dangerous due to the strong sea breeze that could blow someone into the river. Even skilled workers do not dare to do it without safety ropes. Waver is currently standing nervously on top of the bridge, without even wearing a safety belt, and unable to maintain his usual serious expression. Next to him, his servant, Iskandar, sits with a dignified expression. "Der, quickly go down, hurry!" Waver exclaimed, his teeth chattering from the cold and fear. However, the tall servant paid no heed to his words. "I find being a lookout here to be quite suitable. But right now, I want to take in the scenery to lift my spirits." He flipped through a book titled The Art of Modern War while occasionally looking up to take in the view of the west shore. There is a large storage dock there. It serves as a place where the Fuyuki city with shipping containers are accumulated. Although Waver can't see it, from Iskandar's words, he knows that the servant they had been tracking for nearly 4 hours should be there. Iskandar had been wandering around the city early in the morning in order to come into contact with the enemy. By noon today, he had sensed the aura of that servant. Waver wanted to directly kill the opponent, but Iskandar only kept a distance and kept an eye on the opponent. Faced with Waver's questioning, Iskandar only snorted from his nose. "That's obviously trying to lure us out. How could the opponent's aura be so obvious and no one has noticed? Not only me, but other servants are probably also observing them. If we wait and see what happens, maybe one of the impatient masters will take action. I am waiting for that moment." Iskandar's strategy impressed Waver with its reasonableness and surprising nature. Despite his towering and seemingly impulsive appearance, Iskandar possessed a thoughtful and calculated mindset. Heeding Iskandar's advice, Waver decided to bide his time and observe, waiting for the opportunity to strike when a reckless opponent emerged and the battle between the two servants began. Despite not being fully aware of the true power of the servant who was taunting them, Waver surmised that the opponent must not be weak, as he had the confidence to reveal his aura. Similarly, the servant that was lured out would also likely not be weak. Waver decided that by waiting for one of the two parties to retreat, he would be able to launch an attack and defeat the victorious party, much like a fisherman reaping the benefits of a successful catch. Waver and Iskandar decided to track their opponent, who continued to wander around the city while keeping a safe distance. Though Waver understood the importance of standing high to see far, he couldn't help but wonder about the risks involved. Just take an ordinary person, if they fell from here, it would be undoubtedly fatal. Iskandar must be very aware of this, but why did he still disregard Waver's safety and run up here? "I'm falling. Let me down, please. I can't take it anymore," Waver exclaimed, his voice quivering with fear. "Relax, why the rush? Patience is also a form of battle," Iskandar said nonchalantly as he continued to read his book, completely ignoring Waver's distress. It was clear that the two of them had vastly different opinions on the concept of danger and high places. "If you have some free time, why don't you take a look at my books? They're quite good." Hearing Iskandar's suggestion, Waver was reminded of the heavy load in his backpack that caused him discomfort. Despite planning to pack light, his backpack was filled with thick and heavy books. Those books were the ones that Iskandar had taken from the library last night. They were written by military strategists and historians. They also brought a world map. It was understandable that Iskandar, also known as the Conqueror King, would have an interest in geography and the history of war. But why did Iskandar have to pack them all in his backpack? With the upcoming war, did he intend to use these books against the enemy? And since servants could materialize at any time, it was impossible to bring luggage, leaving the burden of carrying these heavy bags to fall on Waver's small frame. "Rider, why do you need to bring these books during battles?" Waver asked with a resentful expression. "It's a necessary preparation for battle, of course," Iskandar replied with a chuckle. "Preparation or not, let's just go. I can't take it anymore," Waver screamed, his legs trembling with fear. He couldn't bring himself to look down, the height was causing him to feel dizzy. Iskandar laughed. "Kid, you said you were here to prove yourself, right? So what about it? You want to teach me a lesson? Saying something like, if you want to prove yourself, show some courage? I won't listen. You need to understand your own identity. I am the master. I am the master. You have to listen to me," Waver retorted, his voice filled with frustration and anger. Iskandar laughed. "Haha, being a leader is not just about talking big and getting angry. The most important thing is learning how to use your own mind." He patted Waver's shoulder, his immense strength causing Waver to lose his balance and tumble down. "Ah!" Falling from the sky, Waver screamed in terror as he experienced the sensation of weightlessness, the cold wind, and the fear of death. I'm done for. I'm dead. Stupid servant killed his own master. As he thought this, Waver was suddenly lifted up by a thick arm and brought back to face his rescuer. Iskandar regarded Waver, who was crying with tears and snot mixing together on his face. Despite the somber scene, Iskandar spoke with a loud and cheerful voice, "Don't lose your bravery now, kid. All right, it's time for us to take the stage. Stupid, 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 stupid." Iskandar paid no attention to Waver's curses and grabbed him by his collar and rode on his chariot, laughing as they raced across the sky. "Ah! I want to go home, I want to go back to England." Waver, like a stubborn kitten, was forcibly dragged by Iskandar as he cursed and shouted, tears and snot mixing on his face as the cold wind beat against him. "Ha ha, ha ha!" The Conqueror King let out a joyful laugh. Chapter 30, C30. Artoria and Dire Muid were fiercely fighting, filling the cold autumn night with a sense of excitement and tension. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed from the distant sky. A new servant had arrived. Artoria and Dire Muid locked eyes, then after a moment of swords clashing, they both backed off and turned their gaze to the southeast sky. As Shirou looked up, he spotted a flying object approaching them, trailing purple sparks of lightning. The source of the noise was now clear. Irisveil gaped in amazement, exclaiming, "A chariot!" The chariot was an ancient one, with two heads, pulled by large, muscle-bound bulls rather than horses. The bulls' hooves were pounding the void as they pulled the magnificent and luxurious carriage. No. The chariot wasn't just hovering in the air, its wheels were thundering and the bulls were stepping on lightning rather than the ground. As the bulls and chariot moved through the empty sky, purple lightning flickered, creating a deafening noise and raising the surrounding temperature. The magical power of the lightning was likely on par with the full force attacks of Lancer and Saber. It could easily kill someone like Shirou, who was completely an E-rank newbie and had no combat experience whatsoever. The conquering king, Iskandar, had finally appeared as a servant. In his hand, Waver's delicate frame was being held like a small kitten, tears and snot streaming down his face, making him look both comical and embarrassing. The chariot finally came to a stop. Waver's fear of heights subsided, but his own embarrassment kindled the arrogance and anger in his youthful and energetic heart. "Rider!" Waver screamed, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, scolding Iskandar. "I will definitely make you understand that a master should not be bullied. Watch out or I'll make you leave right now." Iskandar laughed, completely disregarding Waver's anger, and then gestured toward Saber and Lancer who were staring at them. "Oh? You can try now, young man. Next time, I'll deal with you." Waver shrank under the gaze of Saber and Lancer, his anger instantly turning into fear for his life. Iskandar placed Waver on the chariot and then happily patted his shoulder. "Ha ha ha! Such generosity, as expected of my master." After seeing Iskandar's appearance, Shirou was ready to run away. But before that, there was one piece of information that he wanted to confirm no matter what. As Waver appeared on the battlefield, a disdainful voice filled with disgust echoed throughout the warehouse dock. "So, it's you, Mr. Waver Velvet. Stealing your noble teacher's holy relic and coming to this remote countryside to participate in the War of Magi. Ha ha ha! Mr. Waver Velvet, you are truly audacious. It seems that my usual discipline towards you was not enough, making you forget how much of a foul and dirty rat you are. Well, let me teach you one last lesson as a magus. The War of Magi at the cost of death." Without a doubt, the hateful tone and the voice that made Waver tremble with fear belonged to the Clock Tower's first-class lecturer and one of the 12 lords, the child prodigy Kenneth. It seems that the Lancer team has not changed, Shirou thought to himself. Currently, Shirou has identified all the servants in this Holy Grail War, except for Assassin. Although the Master has not yet been confirmed, the goal of this mission has been largely accomplished. According to what Shirou knows about the Fourth Holy Grail War, if Assassin is still Hassan of the 100 Faces, he should already be ambushed in the highest vantage point, the crane. However, Shirou's position is too far from the crane and he cannot observe such a distant place with the naked eye without using the Saint Graph. But if he uses it, he will be exposed. Furthermore, if the Saber group has not changed, Kiritsugu and his assistant may be still nearby. If Kiritsugu were to discover him, he would probably consider Shirou as a participant. Kiritsugu is a determined individual who will stop at nothing to achieve his goal, even if it means using morally questionable methods. Despite his kind nature, Shirou knows that if he were to come across Shirou, his approach would shift to a better to be safe than sorry mentality, and he would likely kill him without hesitation. Without the protection of a Saint Graph, Shirou's physical body would be vulnerable, and the outcome of a sniper attack would be fatal. With the task accomplished, it would be wise for Shirou to retreat as soon as possible. Shirou decided to leave the scene without drawing attention to himself. He had no desire to watch the live version of Fate/Zero or to hear Iskandar's insults directed towards Kenneth in order to protect Waver. Furthermore, the outcome of the battle at the docks was different than what he had expected. Artoria and Dire Muid fought fiercely, and Artoria never removed her armor during the fight, which rendered Dire Muid's yellow rose of mortality ineffective and prevented him from causing any serious or permanent injuries. Shirou had intended to retreat, but his plans were thwarted by the emergence of the naturally arrogant Gilgamesh, who was drawn to the scene by the clash between the two king's servants. A faint golden light illuminated the area as a figure in shining golden armor materialized on top of a street light pole, about 10 meters above the ground. Such audacity, for those who do not respect this king and dare to recklessly call themselves king. Unexpectedly two of them appear overnight. The figure in golden armor spoke, with a tone of contempt and disdain towards the other servants present on the scene. Despite similarities in Gilgamesh's haughty demeanor and Iskandar's prior overbearing and self-assured attitude toward Dire Muid and Artoria, their fundamental nature differed. Iskandar's speech and gaze lacked the same chill and mercilessness present in Gilgamesh's. Iskandar appeared taken aback by Gilgamesh's aggression and appeared puzzled as he scratched his chin. "Even if you address me with disrespect," he stated, "I am still Iskandar, a renowned conqueror king in the world. I alone am the hero who deserves the title of king among the heaven and earth. The rest are nothing more than a pack of disrespectful mongrels," Gilgamesh declared crudely, making a statement that was even more insulting than an insult. Artoria, too, looked surprised by his words, but Iskandar remained forgiving and let out a sigh, his expression one of surprise. "Why don't you tell us your name first?" Iskandar jokingly said. "If you're a king, you wouldn't be afraid for people to know your name, right?" Gilgamesh's eyes turned red with anger as he glared at the giant in front of him. "You're asking me? A mongrel asking me, a king?" Normally, it would make sense for Iskandar to ask Gilgamesh his true name, but in Gilgamesh's eyes, it was a great disrespect. However, this was not due to Gilgamesh's intention to conceal his true name, it was simply his emotional madness causing him to feel this way. As the Golden King's anger began to rise, a killing intent could be seen on his face. "If I were to allow you wear the glory of submitting to me, yet you remain ignorant of my name, your submission would hold no value for me." As Gilgamesh spoke, a strange, fiery energy began to emerge on both sides of him. In the blink of an eye, blades and spears, each radiating a dazzling brilliance, materialized out of thin air. These were no ordinary weapons, but noble phantasms, powerful artifacts with immense destructive capabilities. Waver trembled with fear, Kenneth held his breath, and even Iris Veal, who was on the battlefield, couldn't help but tense up. In the face of so many powerful noble phantasms, no one, whether they were a magus or an ordinary human, could remain composed. "But before that, you mongrel, why don't you come out? I, the king, have already arrived, yet you refuse to pay homage to my glory. This is the sin of arrogance and it deserves the king's punishment." The Golden King spoke with a haughty and cold tone. "It appears that there is still a servant concealed in the vicinity who has yet to reveal themselves." Shirou, who was about to withdraw from the area, heard Gilgamesh's words and trembled as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Although Gilgamesh didn't say his name, Shirou couldn't shake off the feeling that the words were specifically directed at him. "This king, is there another servant hiding here?" Iskandar asked Gilgamesh, his eyes fixed on the Golden King. "Humph, you call yourself a king yet you can't even see the number of mongrels hiding here. How dare you call yourself a king in front of me?" Gilgamesh sneered coldly. "Ha ha ha," Iskandar laughed in response to Gilgamesh's sarcasm. "A king with grand ambitions and a drive for domination doesn't need to know and do everything himself, isn't that taking away the ability of his subordinates to shine? Humph, you are nothing but a mongrel who has delusions of grandeur and surrounds yourself with other mongrels. What right do you have to call yourself a king of glory?" Gilgamesh sneered contemptuously. "I am Iskandar, the king of conquerors, who toils tirelessly day and night, not for his own glory and not to be known as a conqueror, but for the sake of my subjects. Iskander confidently replied, engaging in a verbal battle with Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh glared at Iskander for a moment before sneering, "A king cannot be humiliated. You, mongrel, have broken the king's law, and must be punished by the king. Ha ha ha. You are a king and I am also a king, how can one king punish another? You have laws and I have laws as well, how can they restrain my actions?" Iskander laughed, not taking the threat seriously. Gilgamesh's eyes narrowed, showing a dangerous glint. Madness, Gilgamesh spat out the word contemptuously, then he turned his attention away from Iskander and focused it on Shirou's location. And then, whoosh! 3 noble phantasm weapons, shining with radiant light, shot toward Shirou like meteors. What the f***ck? Shirou's mind was in turmoil as he saw the 3 shining weapons heading towards him. He couldn't help but curse at Gilgamesh's twisted sense of enjoyment in watching a commoner struggle and die to assert his own kingship and arrogance. The only thought in his mind at this moment was one word. f***ck. Shirou's heart was in shambles, but the blades rushing toward him was all too real. He had no choice but to merge with his Saint Graph and become demi-servant in order to dodge the incoming noble phantasms. He had no other option, his body was too young and his magic circuits were not developed enough. Even though he possessed Emiya's projection, it was not sufficient to project a sword to fight against Gilgamesh's weapons. He could only evade. Boom boom. Like bombs dropped by bombers, the warehouse where Shirou was hiding was completely blown up, its stacked blocks tumbling down in a cloud of thick smoke. In the chaos, Shirou was exposed. Or rather, the moment he fused with his Saint Graph, Shirou was exposed. "Oh? Who is our guest?" Iskander inquired, his voice laced with curiosity as he crossed his arms. Chapter 31, C31. Having fused with the Saint Graph, Shirou knew that he couldn't avoid it anymore. Gilgamesh was opening the gate of Babylon and had set his sights on him. If he didn't come out, another round of attacks was likely to begin. But what was the point? As a mere mortal, Shirou had forced himself to participate in this war of life and death, specifically requesting Scathatch to teach him how to fight to the death. Yet, at this critical moment, without hesitation, Gilgamesh exposed him and even temporarily gave up the clash with Iskander and Artoria. What did he hope to achieve? Did he have a logical reason behind his actions? Shirou pondered for a long time, but couldn't come up with any logical explanation for Gilgamesh's behavior at that moment. If he had to explain it, the only explanation is that this guy's way of thinking is fundamentally different from that of normal people. This was a damning explanation. And now, Shirou had to show himself. Wearing the leather suit of Ultraman, and wrapped in the heavy black cloak, even in the midst of deep autumn, he would feel hot and sweaty. But at this moment, Shirou felt as if the weather was freezing cold. Cold enough that his bones were shaking. "Come out." Iskander hugged his chest and looked at the smoke revealing Shirou's silhouette with interest. Getting closer. Getting closer. Suddenly, ignoring Waver's shouts, Iskandar's expression froze and his eyebrows raised as he directly grabbed Waver and pulled him behind him. Even Diarmuid instinctively tightened his grip on his 2 spears. Artoria stepped forward, flashing to Irisveel's front, facing Shirou. She had a firm grip on the invisible holy sword in her hand. Even Gilgamesh unconsciously wrinkled his brows, but then his eyebrows relaxed, and a pleased smile appeared on his lips. "What's wrong, Saber?" Irisveel asked. "That guy is strange and dangerous," Artoria replied with a serious expression. "Irisveel, stay behind me and don't come out. I'll protect you." Shirou walked out of the fog, looking at the servants who aimed their weapons at him. A bitter smile appeared on his face under the leather suit. What? What should he do? Kaire Kotomine, dressed in his black robe, was shrouded in the silence of the night. He sat in the darkness of the Fuyuki church basement. His eyes were closed, but he was not resting. Instead, he was intently listening to something. At a glance, one might assume Kaire was deep in meditation, yet in reality, he was listening to the low murmurs of the sea breeze. In front of him was a scene. A battle raged on, with sparks flying. Kairei's closed eyes were not focused on the present, but rather on a distant battle taking place near a warehouse dock in Fuyuki City. He was privy to this information due to his servant assassin, who was currently hiding nearby, relaying the same details to him. Kairei was using a Magecraft which he had learned from Tokiomi. This allowed him to share his senses with his servant, making it an invaluable tool for remote surveillance during the Holy Grail War. With his servant, assassin, excelling in reconnaissance, this Magecraft was a great asset to him. The only drawback to this Magecraft was that it can only be used if the servant agrees to it. Kairi himself had learned this thing from Tokiomi, however, even Tokiomi's servant, Gilgamesh, had rejected it. It was not something that the arrogant King Gilgamesh would willingly allow, even if his master requested it. This Magecraft can only be used between Kairi and assassin as a mutual agreement. Teacher, the servant you encountered near the Mata residence has appeared, Kairi said. There was no one in front of Kairi, only an ancient phonograph on the table. The brass speaker was tilted towards Kairi. However, this seemingly antique phonograph responded to him in human language. It appears that the child has the awareness to participate in the Holy Grail War, the phonograph said. He is currently hiding nearby, or perhaps this is the action of the servant himself. Regardless, the outcome is the same. Now that he has entered the battle of Magi, he can only choose to hide or fight for the sake of victory. The voice coming from the phonograph, although distorted, had an unheard and elegant tone that was unmistakably that of Tosaka Tokiomi. Upon closer examination, the phonograph did not have a disc or needle for playing records, instead it had a metal wire connected to a large gemstone under the speaker. Kairi had borrowed this device from Tokiomi. It was a magical tool passed down in the Tosaka family. Another similar tool existed in the Tosaka workshop. It appears that Tokiomi was also sitting in front of a speaker just like Kairi. The gems on the two devices resonated with each other, allowing them to transmit the vibrations of sound through the air from one speaker to the other. When Kotomine Raisei took over the Fuyuki city church, Tokiomi sent the gemstone communication machine to the church. Raisei was his secret collaborator and Raisei's son Kairi, who had already pretended to be a separate faction from Tokiomi when he was selected as the master. Kairi then hid in the church as a form of protection, which was theoretically a benefit only for losers. Of course, Tokiomi's goal was to be able to secretly contact these two people. From the outside, everything appeared normal, and no one would have suspected that Kairi had a way to communicate with the outside world. At that time, Kairi felt that even if he didn't use this unusual device, he could use a radio. However, the advantage of Tosaka's gemstone communication machine over the radio was that there was no risk of conversations being intercepted. In retrospect, Tokiomi's cautious approach actually greatly benefited Kairi. Regardless, now Assassin and Kairi have taken over the role of Tokiomi's eyes and ears, with Gilgamesh no longer being a part of it. Kairi uses his own perspective as a master to keep a watchful eye on all details and report them to Tokiomi, using the assassin's eyes as his own. Saber and Lancer have already engaged in combat and revealed their identities. The one who comes riding a chariot must be Rider. So it appears that the remaining servant is Castor, the one who caused the Holy Grail War to be advanced by 1 year. Tokiomi asked, Kairi, what is the current situation at the scene? Kairi replied, it's very strange. Before Castor appeared, the other servants seemed to have the upper hand, especially Rider was very relaxed. But after Castor came out, Rider became very cautious, not only him but even Saber and Lancer also became very cautious. Is there an abnormal situation? Ask Assassin, what is the feeling at the scene? Tokiomi straightened his body and pondered for a moment, and gave his own suggestion. Yes, teacher, Kairi replied, as he reached out to contact Assassin, also known as Hassan of the 100 Faces, who was observing the scene at Tokiomi's request. That guy is very strange. As Hassan stood on the crane, monitoring the scene, the master questioned him. After much hesitation, Hassan reluctantly offered an uncertain conclusion, the aura Castor exudes doesn't feel like that of a typical servant, yet at the same time, it does. More importantly, since Castor's arrival, I've noticed a significant decrease in my own strength, feeling as though it's been cut in half. Decreased by half. Kairi conveyed Tokiomi's doubts. Yes, that's right, Assassin replied, it's not a weakening of my own attributes. It's more like, my own glory, the praise, songs, or fear that mortals bestowed upon me, has been suddenly taken away by something. That's the feeling. I can feel that my own attributes haven't been affected in any way, but my strength has truly decreased by half. Kairi, who had only entered the world of Magi less than 3 years ago and was still unfamiliar with many aspects of Magecraft, was left confused by Assassin's words. Nevertheless, he dutifully conveyed them to Tokiomi. Crack! A sharp, crunching sound echoed through the room as the phonograph emitted the sound of a cup being crushed. Kairi, Castor must be eliminated first. He is too dangerous for Gilgamesh. Tokiomi's voice, filled with anger and frustration, blared through the phonograph. Kairi was taken aback. This was the first time he had seen Tokiomi lose his composure. "Teacher, what's happened?" he asked. "We must make him leave early. We absolutely cannot let him live through the second night, otherwise, if he cooperates with other servants, it will be detrimental to Gilgamesh as the king." Tokiomi replied with urgency. Tokiomi, a man who believed himself to be of noble birth, found himself lacking in composure and elegance as he spoke with anger. That servant must have been a deceitful rogue in his previous life. He must possess a treasure or ability that is detrimental to a king, hero, or servant with great accomplishments. It must be something that can eradicate or diminish the blessings of a servant's legend and fame. Chapter 32, C32. As Shirou emerged from the rubble of the collapsed warehouses, the servants he encountered looked upon him not with the contempt he had expected, but rather with a mixture of disgust and fear. He was confused as to why they would react this way. "But I'd rather you all look down on me." Shirou bitterly laughed in his heart. Among the group, only Gilgamesh's gaze stood out as different. He looked at Shirou with a predatory glint, as if he were a mere plaything, like a cat watching a mouse. This caused Shirou to shiver with unease. "Oh, this king," Iskandar remarked, glancing towards Gilgamesh, "is this the servant you had to use your noble phantasm to draw out? If he was hiding around, he'll be quite troublesome." He shook his head. Gilgamesh responded to Iskandar's comment with a disdainful humph. "Troublesome? I'm troublesome? No, 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 I am just a commoner with an attribute E, don't give me any deadly labels." Shirou's heart was filled with panic upon facing Iskandar's seemingly brainless evaluation. He thought if he could make Iskandar, a top-notch servant, feel troublesome, he wouldn't have to suffer so much. However, inadequacy can be deadly. "Even though you probably won't tell me, I'll still ask, who are you?" Iskandar fixed a serious gaze on Shirou. "To be honest, my initial plan was to let Lancer draw all the heroes in this world together and then launch a non-elimination form of conquest. But you've made me consider eliminating you directly." Shirou's face was blank under the disguise. "What is this situation?" "No way. Perhaps this is simply the king's innate disgust for traitors." Iskandar shook his head. "Traitor? How did he become a traitor all of a sudden? And the most deadly thing is that he even caught the attention of Iskandar, a top servant in this war." Shirou instinctively wanted to step forward and explain himself, but before he could even say the words "You're mistaken," Artoria tightened her grip on the invisible holy sword in her hand, her expression becoming serious as if she would attack him if he took one more step forward. Shirou's heart was filled with sadness as he was forced to come to a halt. In theory, Shirou should be her master in the Fifth Holy Grail War, shouldn't he? She had made a vow to protect him with her sword, but now she was pointing it at him. Despite understanding that it was morally wrong to define someone based on a potential future event that may or may not happen in the future and knowing he was not Emiya Shirou, the sight of Artoria holding a sword toward him evoked feelings of sadness. He just wanted to go home. He wants to run to the dream and find his big sister for comfort. Shirou couldn't help but feel a bitter taste in his mouth. Was it his youth or the fact that he now had someone to share his pain with that made him feel so vulnerable? Shirou never considered himself particularly strong, especially compared to the heroes around him who had faced life and death struggles. His biggest concern had always been how to make a living as an ordinary person, which hardly qualified as strength. But now, as he stood before the horrors ahead, he knew he couldn't go any further. He halted, feeling a bit flustered as the servants, for some unknown reason, were labeling him as a traitor and showing hostility towards him. Shirou felt a sense of cowardice towards these mythical warriors, but his black cloak and leather suit concealed it, leaving no one the wiser. Despite his fear of heroes, Shirou couldn't help but glance at Gilgamesh, who stood tall atop a street light. This man had assisted him at the Matu mansion and convinced Scathatch to aid him as well. Gilgamesh had even claimed that Shirou had become a source of amusement for him, so Shirou reasoned that at least he wouldn't be eliminated on the first night, right? Shirou believed that as long as he could survive the first night, he could devise his own strategy. But the mocking gaze that Gilgamesh directed at him suggested otherwise, making it clear that the king had no intention of helping him. It was as if he was looking at a clown. "Ah, right. That's right." Unconsciously relying on Gilgamesh had been a mistake from the start. It only served to confirm his own weakness and the mistakes of a mortal. This man, Gilgamesh, only did things that brought him pleasure, and what gave him pleasure at the moment was probably watching a mortal like Shirou struggling on the stage of heroes and walking into a dead end. Shirou felt a deep discomfort in his heart. The feeling of being alone in a vast world with no one to rely on was truly unsettling. It reminded him of the years he spent struggling alone in a big city, without friends or family, feeling helpless. No. It's even worse than that. In the real world, if one fails to make a living, one can always return home and find refuge. But if he fails here, there's only death. Fortunately, it seems that due to mutual fear, no servants have yet attacked him. This made Shirou feel relieved despite his fear. However, since neither the Conqueror King nor the Night King has any intention of taking action, I shall, Lancer Diarmuid declared as he stepped forward, wielding the Crimson Rose, a spear capable of severing magical energy. He pointed it at Shirou and proclaimed, "This servant who defiles the glory of heroes. I, Lancer, shall punish you." Shirou's heart trembled. "You intend to punish me? Will your master approve? Don't forget that there are still many other servants here." Shirou tried to suppress his fear and steady his voice, but his words lacked conviction. It was clear to anyone listening that he was lacking in confidence. "My lord." Diarmuid looked directly at Shirou and called out to Kenneth, who was hiding nearby. I agree. Lancer, punish this servant." Kenneth's voice came out. Shirou was filled with anxiety. He looked in the direction from which Kenneth's voice came and spoke, "Lancer's master, you should think carefully. Lancer may not be able to defeat me, and there are at least 3 servants nearby, no, 4 servants, and there is also an assassin watching you. If Lancer continues to attack me, how will you fare? I don't need to say more, do I? Is there an assassin nearby?" Artoria became even more vigilant and protected Irisveil closely. Iskander crossed his arms and laughed, "It's fine. This king welcomes the battle of heroes. In the name of this king, anyone who interferes will be treated as an enemy of this king. You." Shirou clenched his fists under his sleeves, his heart filled with anger. The most harmless-looking servant, the Conqueror King, now became the blade that would kill him. It's ironic. "So you are Castor. Lancer, defeat him and bring glory to me." Kenneth issued the command. "Yes, my lord." Lancer's face became serious as he stared intently at Shirou, exuding a terrifying killing intent. "This is crazy. This is crazy, crazy." Shirou silently cursed Kenneth in his mind. He had already made his stance clear, so why did Kenneth still insist on defeating him in this way? Shirou couldn't understand Kenneth's motives and likely never would. They were both human, but they had different brains and perspectives, making mutual understanding impossible. The other servants present, however, could understand the fear evident in Shirou's words. The fear of Lancer attacking him was not something that could be easily concealed. No. He struggled. He worked hard. He hid. But for Shirou, as an ordinary person, a common social youth, an unremarkable oppressed social insect, who had always watched leaders or social elite give speeches, and never had the opportunity to speak in front of others, it was impossible for him to overcome the psychological fear, and it was impossible for him to conceal his fear in front of a group of murderers. Moreover, these mythical murderers, all of whom have emerged from a sea of blood and corpses, have an even more acute ability to detect the scent of fear than a hunting dog. What should he do? What can he do? Should he fight? Can he fight? Shirou remembered the words that Skathikne had spoken to him, "My training will prepare you to face servants, allowing you to die in a way that is both honorable and beautiful." The gentle yet playful words echoed in his mind. Yes. The 6-year-old boy named Shirou, facing a genuine servant, had no means of resistance. What should he do? What can he do? The situation had surpassed expectations. The ordinary person, who should have retreated, now had to confront death head-on due to the powerful suppression. What should he do? What can he do? It was like the cry of a drowning person. Even the most arrogant, self-important and powerful individuals, when facing the threat of death, would make a plea for their life. Who will save me? It's just a beautiful illusion, no one responds, and no one answers. The dream world has everything, but in reality, who is a hero? Who would be willing to risk their own lives to save others? However, this is a world where heroes exist. Someone. There is such a hero, who responded to Shirou. "I am the sword of the weak, the shield of the oppressed. My sword cuts through the chains that bind them, my eyes gaze upon the light of freedom, and my feet walk the road of freedom. Can you see it, the weak? The road to freedom. With a towering and massive body, like a chariot breaking through, the warrior of love stands tall as a giant, supporting the crumbling blue sky for the weak. With a smile like a maiden's, he turned his head back, casting a reassuring gaze toward Shirou. Fear not, the weak one. For I am here. The abuser who once almost took Shirou's life now stands as a shield in front of him. ER 33, C33. Shirou's expression was filled with mixed emotions as he gazed at Spartacus standing before him. The world is truly unpredictable. Spartacus, who once almost took his life, now stands before him, like a protective shield. Mad dog! Gilgamesh sneered upon seeing Spartacus, his gaze filled with contempt. Are you the hero who manifested as a berserker? Iskandar smiled cheerfully, you appear to be rational. So, would you like to serve under this king? Spartacus, standing in front of Shirou, when facing the servants, revealed a smile of love with an ambiguous meaning, his eyes scanning over Gilgamesh and the others, oppressors, abusers. Oh, I will never let you take away the freedom of the weak. But when his eyes met Artoria's, he couldn't help but hesitate, his expression becoming more excited. My ally. Artoria's expression remained unchanged. This giant, who is obviously a berserker with a disturbed mind, suddenly appears on the battlefield, provocatively challenging all the servants and then claiming to be an ally. Is this the ravings of a madman or a scheme by the master behind the scenes? Artoria doesn't know, but she is already preparing to retreat from the battlefield. If she were alone, Artoria would have to fight to the death. But the people behind her are the ones she made a knight's oath to protect. As a king, she acted recklessly once and buried Camelot. She learned from her mistake and cannot afford to act recklessly again. Artoria pays no attention to Spartacus's rambling, but someone else does. Mongrel! Who gave you permission to gaze upon this king's honorable countenance with such a filthy gaze? Gilgamesh is like an angry god. In a swift motion, he unleashes several noble phantasms toward Spartacus. For the proud Gilgamesh, Spartacus's ambiguous gaze can be seen as a defilement, a true dirt on his pride. Boom 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 boom. With deadly precision, Gilgamesh's noble phantasm pierces through the body of Spartacus, sending blood splattering everywhere. The ground cracks beneath the impact and explosions echo incessantly. This is it, Shirou thought, trying to seize the opportunity to flee amidst the chaos. But Dire Muid, who had been keeping a watchful eye on him, holds twin spears and stares at him intently. Shirou dare not move recklessly and also dared not to leave Spartacus, who was serving as his shield, too far away. Oh. Despite the numerous wounds inflicted upon him, Spartacus displayed no signs of pain on his face. Instead, his expression was one of pure excitement, as if something incredibly joyous had occurred. He shouted, oppressors! Tyrants! Keep oppressing me, keep torturing me. With my body, I will pave the way to freedom. As Spartacus spoke, his body began to expand, and his aura grew increasingly powerful. Tisk! Gilgamesh's expression turns to one of displeasure, and with a snap of his fingers, the sword that had previously suppressed Spartacus materializes once again, crushing him with the force of a mountain. You have quite an impressive collection of noble phantasms, don't you? Iskandar looked at Gilgamesh with interest, his smile turning cheerful. You just keep getting more and more interesting to me. Humph, Gilgamesh replied with a cold gaze, but Iskandar's smile remained unchanged. This is not good. Spartacus is being suppressed. Shirou's heart raced with panic. It appears that there are no obstacles hindering me from engaging you in combat, Dire Muid said gravely, twirling his spear with a serious expression. Lancer, why do you have to fight me? Shirou tightens the black cloak around his body, feeling the chill creeping in. How dare you claim that I, as a servant, tarnish the honor of heroes? Shirou exclaimed, his anger flaring. He was just a young boy of 6 years old. His Saint Graph, merged with that of Emiya, was irrefutable proof of his identity. Where did Lancer get the notion that he was a traitor? To sully his innocence in such a manner was an outrage. Your noble phantasms or your abilities are enough to determine this, Dire Muid said. Damn it! My noble phantasm, my abilities, where do I have? Could it be that? Shirou abruptly paused, a dawning realization hitting him. His noble phantasm and ability panel had all been inherited from Emiya, the only distinction being one of his skills associated with mortals. The wisdom of mortals we are not the chosen ones, but we are the masters of our own fate. Praise those who are good to us, and destroy those who are against us. But didn't Scathatch say that these were merely records of human wisdom? Where, then, did Dire Muid and the other servants derive their reasons for resentment from? Damn it! As Dire Muid approached, Shirou's sole focus was on survival and he had no energy left to consider other thoughts. Oh. The weak are suffering, the weak are being oppressed, how can I stand by and watch? The hero of the weak, the sword of the weak, the shield of the weak, the hero who clears the path to freedom for the oppressed, Spartacus, burst forth from the deep pit with a sudden burst of energy. Oh! Gilgamesh was surprised. The sword was massive, its weight beyond comparison to any earthly objects, but it was moved by Spartacus. He's grown even stronger than before. Waver cried out, clutching Iskandar's cloak in alarm. It appeared that Iskandar had noticed Waver's frightened gaze. Not only has his momentum increased, but the great deeds he has accomplished have also been boosted. It's surprising that this caster is unexpectedly such a hero, Iskandar said with appreciation. He then looked at Shirou, his eyes becoming a bit apologetic. I must extend my apologies, as I had misjudged the situation. This person is not a traitor, but a wanderer roaming the four corners of the world, singing the praise of heroes. Although, his bravery does seem somewhat lacking. Artoria's grip on the holy sword relaxed slightly, and Irisveal, who was standing behind, noticed and inquired, "What's the matter, Saber? Is everything okay?" "I misunderstood him," Artoria said apologetically, before adding in a serious tone, "Irisveal, we need to prepare to retreat. It's too chaotic here, I can't protect you effectively in this fight." "I understand." Irisveal nodded. Artoria tightened her grip on the holy sword, her gaze scanning the area, alert for any signs of danger from the other servants as she prepared to retreat. "Berserker, must you obstruct my path to bringing glory to my lord?" Dire Muid pointed his spear at Spartacus. Oh, oppressor." Spartacus replied with an ambiguous smile. Unfortunately, the two were not on the same wavelength. Suddenly, boom! Iskandar's chariot let out a thunderous roar, splitting the battlefield in two. Its power was enough to match the combined strength of Artoria and Dire Muid's attack. Spartacus faced him with a smile, but Shirou had to quickly dodge to avoid it. "As I said before, the fight between heroes is mine alone. I will not allow anyone to interfere, not even you, the hero in the flesh of Berserker," Iskandar said with a cheerful laugh. The battlefield was now split in two, with Iskandar focusing on Spartacus and Dire Muid keeping an eye on Shirou. Damn it! Shirou cursed, he had never before been bothered by Iskandar's grandeur, but now, because of it, he was being forced to face death. "There's one thing I must apologize for as a knight," Dire Muid pointed his spear at Shirou and said, "I thought you were a dirty and treacherous person, but it seems now that is not the case. For my rash judgment, I offer my sincere apologies as a knight and I will fight with all my might as an unnamed hero." Dire Muid took a stance and charged towards Shirou. Spartacus roared, trying to intervene, but was directly knocked away by Iskandar's chariot. Gilgamesh laughed arrogantly with a joyful light shining in his eyes. Artoria focused on protecting herself and Irisveal from the surrounding servants and possibly the hidden assassin, as she retreated step by step. The weak hero had been defeated, leaving only those known as heroes who were actually thugs. The world was vast, but gods and Buddhas had retreated, leaving nothing to rely on. The concept of the wisdom of mortals is accurate. Mortals are not predestined for greatness, but they have the power to shape their own lives. There are no gods, emperors, or immortals that mortals can rely on for guidance or protection, there is only oneself. The fear grips tightly, causing the body to tremble and the mind to shake as death approaches. Escape and resistance seem impossible, and fear paralyzes both the mind and the body. But, amidst all this, the brain remains active, still struggling to survive. "Move! Move!" Shirou shouted to himself, trying to give himself suggestions. As the weight of life and death bore down on him, Shirou gritted his teeth. With a newfound determination, he spoke a name that caused even the mighty king of knights, Artoria, to pause and the unparalleled warrior Dire Muid, to be taken aback. "Dire Muid," Shirou asked with a fierce tone, "do you still remember your lord, Fionn Mac Come Hail?" Chapter 34, C34. The shame and shock that Dire Muid felt upon his lord's name being revealed was a punishment far greater than the mere exposure of his true name. How do you know this name? Dire Muid halted his attack, his heart trembling as he stared at Shirou in disbelief. Why? Because I am a witness. Shirou replied quickly, his mind racing at high speed under the pressure of life and death. Showing the courage to break free from the shackles of oppression, he continued, your elopement with Princess Grain, you took away the wife of the lord you served. Do you know the fate of the Fianna Knights? Do you remember the fate that ultimately befell them because of your actions? Unavoidable memories flooded Dire Muid's mind once again, filling his heart with a sense of shame and self-blame. No. Don't say any more. Dire Muid covered his head with his hands, glaring at Shirou with eyes filled with anger. Why not? Why won't you admit it? Are you running away, oh great knight? No, are you even worthy of being called a knight? Taking away the wife of your lord, to whom you swore to die for, caused the rift between the Fianna Knights and the neighboring kingdom to become irreconcilable, ultimately leading to the collapse of the knights. And you, at the moment of death, still had the gall to beg for help from your former lord. Tell me, Dire Muid, are you worthy of being called a knight? Shirou questioned him relentlessly and mercilessly, revealing Dire Muid's most unwelcome memories. With slightly short breath, as if facing the most terrifying attack in the world, Dire Muid's forehead was covered in sweat, his eyes trembling, and his hands shaking. No. I still remember your deceit when you gained Fion's trust. Just like now, you pretended to be brave and talked about dedicating glory to your lord. But, what was the result? Shirou mercilessly attacked Dire Muid's psychological defense line step by step. Even Kenneth, who was hiding nearby, made a slight sound of movement. He too has been mentally attacked. No, I. Dire Muid stammered, not knowing how to respond, his mind filled with guilt for his past lord, Fion, and his fellow knights in arms. If it weren't for his actions, the Knight Order would not have fallen apart. Shirou observed Dire Muid, who had abandoned his offensive stance and was now trapped in a state of self-doubt. Despite his racing heart and surging adrenaline, Shirou's mind remained clear, and he had not yet relinquished the fight. He knew that if he gave up the fight, he would die at the hands of Dire Muid's spear. As Shirou prepared to continue his mental attack, a gust of wind, like a sword, sliced towards him, cutting off his words. He looked up to see Artoria, slowly stepping back, with a solemn expression on her face, her hand raised and her sharp, invisible holy sword pointed at him without hesitation. Interfering in a knight's duel goes against my principles, Artoria said seriously, but this is enough. The insult to the knight, that's enough. Lancer and I have fought before, he is a true knight, I won't allow you to insult him any more. Shirou gave a bitter smile. He had once held feelings for her, but now she had become his enemy, ready to take his life without hesitation. She was sharp and merciless. Shirou put away his immaturity and questioned the Night King, are you saying that knights are only allowed to be praised for their fairness and integrity, even if it's not true? It's not like that. But you are insulting a knight. Artoria stared at Shirou. I am stating facts. Are the things I am saying not true events that have actually happened? Night King, are you praising knights while denying the reality created by someone named Dire Muid? Just like you want to deny the destruction of Camelot. Shirou retorted with a firm voice. Camelot. Artoria tightened her grip on her holy sword. Artoria, your lack of attention to the issues of Lancelot and Guinevere ultimately led to the downfall of the Knights of the Round Table and even the death of Knight Gawain. Your failure to address the internal struggles of Camelot and Mordred's betrayal ultimately resulted in the Battle of Camlan and the collapse of your kingdom. Shirou spoke harshly, leveling accusations at Artoria. When a husband fails to communicate with his wife, a father with his child, or a king with his subjects, it leads to chaos and disorder. Tell me, should I praise you blindly and overlook your mistakes, or will you use your holy sword to force me to sing your praises? Your supposed greatness and righteousness. I. Shirou's words cut deep, revealing the pain in Artoria's heart. Her determined expression faltered as she struggled to hold onto her invisible holy sword. The weight of her past mistakes and the responsibility for her kingdom's downfall seemed to overwhelm her, causing her to stumble for a moment. Shirou looked at the wavering Artoria. He didn't want to hurt her, he didn't want to expose her wounds and rub salt in them. But what can he do? This is the only way he can defeat these two servants who uphold the knight's spirit. This is his only way to survive. If he were to hesitate in his actions, the outcome would be death. Ha 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 ha. Gilgamesh laughed heartily, his face beaming with pleasure. He was content, truly content. The comedy of the situation, the grotesque display, it was all so amusing. A mongrel should have the ugliness of a mongrel. At last, the king is pleased. He can withdraw now, right? Shirou thought. This guy won't stop him anymore, right? But how should he withdraw? Shirou felt a bit of the tension ease as he thought he had managed to survive. However, he was unaware that his actions, driven by self-preservation, had angered a lioness. You are correct, I cannot deny my mistakes. My failure to address the issues with Lancelot and Guinevere, my lack of communication with the Knights of the Round Table, the death of Gawain, Mordred's rebellion and the fall of Camelot, all these are my mistakes. I failed as a king, a husband and a knight. I take full responsibility for my actions, and that is why I answered the Holy Grail's call and came to this world. To atone for my mistakes. To make Camelot's dream come true. Artoria gazed at Shirou with a resolute expression, but you have a hidden agenda to reopen my wounds, you have a hidden agenda to rub salt in my wounds. Since you are also a participant in the Holy Grail War, and since you did this to me, I don't have to hold back. In the name of my sword, I swear, I will defeat you in this war. Indeed, Dire Muid rose to his feet, his eyes growing more resolute as he looked at Shirou. I came to this world to fulfill an unchanging wish. I once dishonored my lord, now I will bring glory to him. Your methods of trying to inflict pain on others are low and dishonorable. I swear, these 2 spears will be the last thing you ever see. Shirou was surprised and left without words. His plan to exploit their vulnerabilities had backfired. A person who seeks to manipulate others by attacking their hearts ultimately falls victim to their own schemes. It must be said, it is a humorous irony. At that moment, the 2 knights whose dark past had been brought to light by Shirou, have a fierce determination to kill him and an intense anger towards him. Ha 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 ha. Gilgamesh laughed with great joy. Chapter 35, C35. Shirou tightened his jaw and asked, "What's the matter? Are you angry and looking to silence me?" Artoria, gripping the holy sword, replied resolutely, "No. I made a mistake and I will take responsibility for it. I will not hide from the truth, no matter what others may say or do. Accepting and rectifying my mistakes is the reason I am here. There is no dishonor in admitting your mistakes. The true dishonor lies in denying them and failing to make amends." She looked solemn as she continued, "I accept my punishment for my mistakes. So do not try to inflict further pain on others. You too will be held accountable for your actions." This mother lioness is completely angry. Shirou let out a bitter laugh. The very tactic that had just saved his life had now turned into a deadly provocation. Artoria and Dire Muid, now known as Saber and Lancer, had a determined intention to kill Shirou. Regardless of which of them it was, Shirou understood that he could not afford to anger them. A single blow from either of them, he realized, would result in his immediate death. The noble Phantasm Unlimited Blade Works was the only hope for a counterattack, but its charging time was too lengthy, making it impossible for him to endure until it was fully charged. So, what should he do? Artoria fixed her gaze on Shirou, her eyes blazing with killing intent. This caused the holy sword in her hand to sharpen and radiate a cold, chilling light. "Do you seek to take my life? On the first night of the Holy Grail War? You have the power to do so, it's your choice. But I will not go down without a fight. Remember, there is still an assassin lurking nearby." Shirou yelled, holding up his palm and projecting 3 sharp swords toward the crane. In this dire situation, revealing the presence of an assassin was the only way to make them cautious and increase his chance of survival. However, Shirou had not yet confirmed whether the assassin was the one he remembered or if they were hiding on the crane. He could only take a chance, having done all he could, and leaving the rest to fate. If he was correct, then Artoria and Dire Muid, who already showed a desire to end his life, would become wary and present a chance for him to flee. But if he was mistaken, then the journey of Fujimaru Shirou would come to a tragic end right here. Boom! The air was filled with the sounds of explosions and collapsing buildings, and through the mist, a figure could be seen leaping away. With all the other servants gathered in one place, this individual concealed their presence, watched the area, and effortlessly evaded Shirou's attack. It could only be assassin. The assassin was indeed lurking nearby. This realization made Artoria and the rest cautious. He gambled right. Thank you. Assassin. Like a gambler who had bet everything on one roll of the dice, Shirou was filled with relief. However, revealing the presence of the assassin alone was not enough to ensure his survival. He must keep fighting and strive for victory. Come on, my ordinary mind. Come on, my clumsy mouth. This is a matter of life and death for me. Do you understand? Do you grasp the seriousness of this situation? Assassin is indeed here, and your master is present as well. Do you want to defeat me? To strike me down? Are you not worried that your master may be killed in the process? Or, do you believe that as caster, I have no means of defense and can be killed effortlessly? Consider carefully, your master is helpless against assassin. If I can hold you back, your master will be murdered by assassin, as long as you don't eliminate me in time. You spout all of this and yet you can't conceal your cowardice. Dire Muid glared at Shirou. Well said. I am indeed scared, and my words cannot hide my fear. After all, I am caster, and I am no match for you in close combat. But do you truly believe that you can kill me in a single blow? Do you think I am incapable of delaying you? I am also a legendary hero from history, the savior of the people, the glorious legend. Shirou suppressed his inner fear and spoke with confidence. My lord. Your lord? The novice magus from the clock tower, facing an assassin who has left a mark in history? Do you truly believe he has the capability to survive? Very well then, you may try. Don't blame me for not warning you, this time the materialized assassin is not a single entity. Shirou locked eyes with Dire Muid as he spoke. Dire Muid hesitated, uncertain. Shirou turned his gaze towards Artoria and asked, What do you say, King of Knights? Are you ready to put me to the test and see if you can end my life in a single blow? Are you willing to abandon Einsburn's homunculus, which you have pledged to protect and defend? Are you trying to do it again? Artoria glared at Shirou. Shirou sneered, as caster, I would be foolish to engage in close combat with you. So tell me, King of Knights, are you willing to disregard your own oath once again? Or is it because the homunculus standing behind you is not your true master, and therefore, you don't have any reservations? Artoria's hand suddenly trembled. Irisveil von Einsburn, standing behind her, was shocked and quickly covered her mouth. This was enough for everyone to grasp the truth behind Shirou's words that Artoria's true master was someone else entirely. The church's basement. I apologize, teacher. Due to Caster's unexpected assault, assassin's identity has been revealed. Kaire, who was concealed in the basement of the church, reported to Tokiomi as he operated the device in front of him. I see. That projection magic? Tokiomi inquired. Yes, Caster projected a sword and swiftly attacked assassin, as if he had foreknowledge of the assassin's presence, Kaire reported. Upon receiving this information, Tokiomi made his own assessment. It appears that Caster also possesses a noble phantasm or ability that can break through assassin's concealment. Yes, teacher. Furthermore, Caster also exposed the fact that assassin is not a single entity and used this information to deter other servants from attacking him, Kaire added. Indeed, it's quite dangerous, Tokiomi sighed in concern. There is one more thing, teacher. Caster stated that Saber's true master is not the Einsburn homunculus, Kaire informed. If Caster's claims are true, then it would seem that Saber's true master must be Kiritsugu, the one who married into the Einsburn family and lacks even a shred of true magus pride, Tokiomi stated. Kiritsugu. Kairei's eyes flicked up briefly before returning to their previous calm state. Not bad. However, Caster's information-gathering abilities are quite terrifying despite his master being just an ordinary boy. It's possible that he has knowledge of our alliance, but has yet to reveal it. We must ensure that he never does and eliminate him as soon as possible, Tokiomi instructed through the device. Kaire responded with a calm, subtle nod, yes. The dock warehouse. Shirou fixed his gaze on Artoria. That man's name is Kiritsugu, isn't it? The infamous Magus killer. You. How did you know? Irisveil was taken aback by the revelation, nearly revealing her surprise, but was quickly interrupted by Artoria. Despite this, it became clear to everyone present that Artoria's true master was someone else, a man named Kiritsugu. Listen, all of you servants with a master, this issue cannot be ignored, Shirou cried out, sweeping his gaze across the assembly of heroes. Dire Muid, Iskandar, your masters are at risk too. He spoke with conviction. Multiple assassins have infiltrated this battlefield, and the King of Knights Master is a ruthless Magus killer. It's likely that he has already targeted the current masters with a sniper rifle. Where is he targeting? Is it over there? Shirou gazed in the direction from where Kenneth's voice had emanated. Kenneth reacted with a disdainful sniff, betraying his disgust. Traditional magi held deep contempt for modern weaponry, considering them a violation of the magical code of conduct. Or maybe there. Shirou then cast his gaze towards the war chariot that was keeping Spartacus at bay, where Waver, who was concealed behind Iskandar, was stationed. He hesitated briefly before continuing, maybe he's already aimed at that young man's head. Waver cowered in fear, not wanting to experience the frightful sensation of being blown to pieces. Or perhaps me. Shirou pointed at his own head and exclaimed, "Oh, I forgot. I'm a servant." He only targets magi serving as masters. After all, he's a Magus killer. Waver shrunk down even further, becoming even more frightened. Meanwhile, Irisveel's expression was grave. Shirou's gaze returned to Artoria and Dire Muid, fiercely questioning them, "Are you willing to take that gamble? You two honorable knights? You launch an attack on me and see if I can keep you occupied until the assassin lurking around us kills your master, the person you swore to protect." Shirou's voice boomed with excitement and challenge. "This is a wager. The stakes are straightforward. If you win, I die, but if I win, I'll collect the body of your master for you. So, noble knights, are you ready to join this gamble of life and death?" His adrenaline was rushing wildly, his heart pounding with excitement. The other servants thought Shirou was insane for gambling with his life, betting that Artoria and Dire Muid would retreat in light of the assassin's murder of their master. He was taking a chance that their desire for self-preservation would outweigh their resolve to secure a certain victory. The knights hesitated, each with their own reasons for participating in the Holy Grail War. But regardless of their reasons, they needed their master to be alive to continue fighting. Artoria hesitated for a moment, but then her gaze became clear as she made a decision. She entered into an agreement with the person behind her, becoming her knight. The battlefield was always changing and she had long desired to retreat, but Shirou's words made her pause. As long as the person she made the oath of protection to was still alive, she wouldn't do anything that might endanger her life. Dire Muid stared seriously at Shirou. "You truly are a despicable person, who only attacks the hearts of others." "I'm the one who's despicable? And what about you all? Bullying me with your numbers? I'm a caster. If you want to fight, then do it fairly. Attack my workshop. Let's see who's stronger, my Magecraft or your swords and spears. Talking about honor while ganging up on me? What kind of honor is that?" Shirou asked with annoyance. "This is war, this type of encounter battle, how can it be considered despicable? If this is considered despicable, then how can wars be fought?" Iskandar interrupted, intrigued by the conversation. "If it's already called war, what's despicable about the means I use, the Conqueror King?" Shirou questioned Iskandar, challenging his statement. "If you want to fight, then fight with knives and spears. The winner is victorious, the loser is dust." Dire Muid took over the conversation, emphasizing the traditional way of fighting. "This is war, not a duel. Your idea of fair and square is simply exploiting my weaknesses. War is always about the strong exploiting the weak. Using your strengths to attack my weaknesses, and calling it fair and square? That's pure nonsense." Shirou sneered. However, Shirou didn't take his argument with Dire Muid and the others seriously. They were not the same person, with different personalities, abilities and growing environments, so how could their thoughts be the same? In an era where the strength of individuals determined everything on the battlefield, it was natural for Artoria and Dire Muid to place great value on personal combat and to see dying in battle as honorable. However, as a modern person, Shirou did not possess the mentality that death was like returning home. He simply wanted to survive. He wanted to live in this world. Ancient and modern, hero and commoner, extraordinary and ordinary are vastly different groups, it's unlikely for them to truly understand one another. Shirou declared, "Now that we all understand the gravity of the situation, let's retreat peacefully tonight. Otherwise..." Shirou turned to Iskander and queried, "Conqueror King, the odds are currently 2 against 1, which is hardly a fair fight. If they insist on battling, would you be willing to release Berserker and let him fight on my side?" Iskandar shook his head, "No." Shirou's expression twisted in frustration, he asked firmly, what do you mean? Are you going to disregard the rules you set for yourself? If that's the case, you, the Conqueror King, are no more than this. Not at all, Iskander shook his head, his face serious. What I mean is that if the Night King wants to intervene, her opponent will be me, the Conqueror King. Iskander's tiger-like eyes fixated on Diarmuid and Artoria, he said firmly, the heroic battle is one that I, the Conqueror King, acknowledge and uphold through my laws. If you attempt to break my laws, you will face the punishment that comes with it. I, too, am a king, Conqueror King, Artoria declared, her blue eyes blazing like an angry lion. Your laws have no hold over me. But as a knight, I am bound by my own code of honor and chivalry. I cannot act against these principles. She continued, her voice ringing with determination. Caster, your war is unlike my own. I will use my sword to bring down your strongest fortress, dismantle your magical defenses, and pierce through your heart and soul. The laws of the Conqueror King cannot restrain the Night King, but her glory and her conviction are enough to prove her worth. She has chosen to face Caster head-on. And what about you, Lancer? The king wants to hear your decision. Iskander's gaze shifted to Diarmuid. I agree, Diarmuid looked at Shirou intently, a knight's duel should not be sullied. I will attack head-on, break through head-on, and my spear will be the last sight in Caster's eyes. Oh. Iskander questioned, then, will the lord you have sworn allegiance to, agree with your decision? Of course. Diarmuid confidently replied, my lord is a noble person, who embodies glory, honor, and all virtues in the world. Is that so? I hope your perception is not misguided. Iskander stroked his chin, his serious expression dissipated and he smiled brightly, if that's the case since all of you heroes are also worried about assassin, it's best to disperse for now. Artoria sheathed her sword to show her intentions. Diarmuid sought Kanatha's opinion and received a favorable response, he too sheathed his spear. Shirou breathed a sigh of relief as he realized the first night had passed without incident. Finally, the danger had passed. However. Wait. Gilgamesh's voice thundered, capturing everyone's attention. His blood-red eyes were locked on Shirou as he declared, my servant is not present and there is no need to concern ourselves with the mongrel. How do you plan to convince me, the king, to forego punishing all of you mongrels with the king's punishment? Chapter 36, C36. Shirou looked directly at Gilgamesh and asked, is that what you want? To compete with us on equal footing on the stage. Gilgamesh's eyes narrowed slightly, then the corners of his mouth lifted, and he laughed, ha 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 ha. Delightful, delightful. The true nature of the mongrel is finally exposed. Ha ha ha. Gilgamesh's laughter like that of a maniac echoed throughout the area and his figure slowly disappeared. His intentions were clear through his actions. Since there are no objections, then, I will take my leave, Shirou said as he prepared to retreat. Wait, Caster. Artoria halted Shirou, her expression serious, she repeated again, prepare your fortress well, don't regret it when I come to crush it head-on. Shirou's heart soured, but he let out a laugh, if you have the ability, come and try. I'll show you how formidable an and fortification construction can be. Big talk, is not something the weak can do. Teacher, Caster has left, Kaire reported the situation to Tokiomi. Have assassin quietly follow him and eliminate the child from the Fujimaru family. This Caster is very troublesome for Gilgamesh, he must not be allowed to remain. Tokiomi calmly gave out the cruel task. Kaire nodded calmly, I understand. Kaire's face was calm, his heart was calm, and his tone was calm. As a participant in the Holy Grail War, he seemed to not realize the cruelty of this task. But he felt that his actions went against the teachings of the church, so he asked again, Teacher, isn't this too cruel? You said that child is only 6 years old. That child has entered the world of Magi. Regardless of the goal, whether it's preserving the mystery or winning the Holy Grail, he is not fit for the task. As a master, he must bear the responsibility, regardless of his age or whether he entered the war willingly or not. Tokiomi spoke elegantly, like a noble. I understand. However, Caster has reportedly said that his fortification is A+. From the perspective of assassin, it may be difficult to infiltrate his workshop, Kaire explained. Caster's master is a 6-year-old child, and Tokiomi has already told him this. Therefore, in order to win, it is inevitable that Caster will conceal the child in his own magical workshop. Tokiomi addressed Kairei's skepticism by saying, "Caster is known for his devious tactics, so it's hard to tell if what he says is true or false. Additionally, building an A and rank fortification requires a significant amount of rare materials, and Caster has only been summoned for a little over 2 weeks. Given that his master is a child, it's unlikely that he would have had the time to collect the necessary materials and construct a territory. So, it's likely that the territory he built is just a simple magical workshop. The most important thing to note is that there are many assassins present. It's best to use one to investigate, and if possible, to probe Caster." Tokiomi's plan is sound, but he failed to consider the emotional impact it would have on the assassin who was discarded. As Tokiomi's disciple, Kairei will work to address this oversight and improve the plan. So he nodded, "I understand." Screaming, wailing, rolling. Byakuya, the man known as the apparent head of the Mata family, had no innate talent for Magecraft. Despite this, he had studied some magical knowledge from a young age and awakened weak magic circuits within his body. However, the magical energy that his circuits were able to produce was not sufficient to sustain the demands of the materialized berserker, Spartacus. His magical energy was being drained away, like a vampire relentlessly sucking his life force. His magic circuits were being overworked unceasingly, sapping his magical energy and making him almost faint. He had several times considered using the final command seals, to end the suffering caused by that damned berserker and make it exit the stage. However, not allowed. The true head of the Mata family, who exists only as a worm since his physical body has been destroyed, gave the command. Why? Byakuya Mata screamed in agony. "Berserker may withdraw, but it won't be at the discretion of the Mata family," Zukin declared. The Mata family, one of the 3 families responsible for constructing the Holy Grail War, had participated in every war, including this one. However, Mata Zukin had already decided to abandon this war and collaborate with the Tosaka family in exchange for Tosaka's exceptional offspring, Sakura. But, their plan failed. And, they were also discovered by Tosaka Tokiomi while performing their secret technique. The Mata family's magic attribute is water and absorption. They are skilled in creating familiars, and their technique of controlling familiars is based on restraint and control. In the Holy Grail War ritual, the system of summoning servants, Mata Zukin, who was known as Makari Zalgen hundreds of years ago, was the one who invented the binding of servants with command seals. At that time, Makari Zalgen was also a highly respected worm master. The use of worms as familiars was not the problem. The most significant issue was that he was discovered by Tosaka Tokiomi to have hidden his soul in a worm's body in pursuit of immortality, as well as a huge number of questionable worms. That man had a strong sense of dignity and considered himself a noble. Therefore, he condemned Mata Zoikan's actions as degenerate for abandoning the traditional magecraft of the Mata family and instead resorting to crest worm. The secrets of magical families are strictly forbidden to be viewed by outsiders, and any attempt to do so is considered an act of war. So Tosaka Tokiomi originally had only a basic understanding of the Mata family magecraft but did not know its true nature. However, after seeing Mata Zoikan's true identity and the lust worm, he knew that his plan had failed. As long as Tosaka Tokiomi is alive, Mata Zukin will not be able to obtain the long-coveted exceptional successor, and will not be able to achieve his grand plan for immortality. The reason Mata Zukin cannot defeat Tosaka Tokiomi is not a lack of capability on his part, but rather the timing of the situation. At this crucial juncture, Tosaka Tokiomi has summoned a powerful servant, making him an opponent that Mata Zukin cannot currently contend with. This is due to the fact that servants are significantly stronger than magi, particularly Gilgamesh, who possess multiple noble phantasms. As a result, it is imperative that Berserker not be permitted to withdraw. If Tosaka Tokiomi utilizes the servant's power to eradicate the Mata family, without a servant of their own, the Mata family will be unable to defend themselves. Additionally, Berserker's noble phantasm is a major problem and source of concern. Crying warmonger. The noble phantasm that embodies the heroic rise of the humiliated Spartacus, enables him to convert the damage he takes into magical energy until he reaches his limit and ultimately self-destructs. The self-destruct's massive explosion had the power to decimate a section of Fuyuki city and uncover the Mata family's secret. Should this occur, both the clock tower and the church would direct their focus to the Mata family, with Mata Zukin's secret being revealed to the world. Therefore, it was imperative that Berserker not be allowed to withdraw. At the very least, it must not be brought about by the use of command seals for self-destruction. As for controlling this berserker, it is a completely hopeless task. The individual known as Spartacus is in a state of confusion and has been assaulting Matazukan since the day of his summoning while shouting oppressor. He possesses an A-rank unyielding will skill which grants him exceptional physical and mental endurance. To use him, one must rely on command seals to control him, but with an A-rank unyielding will, controlling this formidable berserker with only 2 command seals is impossible for most masters. Fortunately, the Matav family's Magecraft, which is renowned for manipulating familiars, is highly proficient in control and compulsion-related Magecraft. At the same time, Matazukan, the creator of the command seals system, also has some tricks up his sleeve when it comes to controlling. Therefore, before Matabiakia summoned Spartacus, Matazukan made some arrangements so that he could use 1 command seal to achieve the effect of 2 command seals for forced control. Due to Spartacus's conditions, he cannot be controlled without a command seal, and thus, he cannot be kept within the Matav family and must be raised outside. So, endure it, my descendants. He 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 he. Matazukan cackled sinisterly as he gazed upon the torment of his useless offspring. Byakuya screamed in agony, his cries echoing through the room. But over the sound of his pain, he heard the chilling laughter of his grandfather. Despite his burning desire to end the old man's life, Byakuya knew it was beyond his reach. The revelation that his grandfather was a worm had left him bewildered. He couldn't be sure what kind of safeguards the old man had in place or if this was even his true form. The enigmatic nature of the old man left Byakuya confounded, making it impossible for him to rise up against him. Furthermore, the prospect of his grandfather's army of worms filled him with dread. All he could do was endure the pain and listen to the haunting laughter of the old man. After returning to the base, Shirou quickly headed to the bathroom. Once inside, he closed the door behind him and began shedding his black cloak and leather suit. As he leaned against the wall, he couldn't hold back and proceeded to vomit into the trash can. Shirou's mind was focused on the information he had obtained and the familiar plot. By utilizing this knowledge, he was able to survive the first night. However, the overwhelming killing intent of Dire Muid and Artoria, born from the countless deaths and bloodshed, caused his modern, ordinary body to release adrenaline. His mind and body trembled as a result, ultimately leading to the physical manifestation of this phenomenon in the form of vomiting. Thankfully, he survived. Despite the severity of his situation, Shirou was still able to survive. But it seemed that everything had returned to the starting point. The timeline had advanced by 1 year and the warehouse battle had occurred, but aside from the changes in the identities of certain characters such as Berserker becoming Spartacus, he becoming Castor, and Gilgamesh treating him as a plaything, it appeared that everything else had remained unchanged. While this outcome was positive, it did not bring him any joy. This realization only served to further worry him, as it meant that there must be some significant alteration that he was currently unaware of. But what could it be? In fact, the reason why the timeline had advanced by 1 year was also a mystery. His own transmigration had occurred only a little over a month ago and his involvement in the world was relatively limited. It appeared that all these changes, everything that happened, was a result of Sakura's defiance of fate and her decision to run away from home. But where was the major alteration? Where was the inconsistency? Where was the source of the change? Shirou had a look of confusion in his eyes. However, perhaps this was for the better. Thanks to these changes, Sakura did not inherit the Matav family and did not fall into that tragic fate. Because of this, the appearance of Spartacus added a glimmer of hope to the dire situation they currently faced. But, the events were only slightly different. Perhaps this is good, at least the plot has not changed and the characters have not undergone big changes. And this is one of the few advantages that Shirou has. As he lay down on his bed, Shirou thought to himself, I'll dream of Scapegoat tonight. I've made it through today, and that's enough. With that, he drifted off into the dream world. Shirou did not remove his suit or black cloak, as these 2 layers of protection provided him with a small sense of security. Though this sense of security was insignificant, like a grain of rice, for those who were in the shadow of death, it was enough for them to cling to. The night was cold, and the silence was all-encompassing. Perhaps, this has already become a peaceful night. However, get out! As Shirou entered the Shadow Kingdom in his dream, Scathatch greeted him with a swift blow to the stomach before he had a chance to even speak. Pain. It hurts so much. The sensation of being struck in the stomach was akin to being hit with a hammer. The pain in his spiritual body in the dream instantly connected to his real body's brain's pain center. The sudden jolt of pain briefly awoke Shirou from his unconscious state, causing him to sit up in surprise. Wah! Shirou clutched his stomach, his face contorted in pain. He looked confused as he wondered why Scathatch had abruptly ended his dream in such a violent manner. Could it be that Scathatch was experiencing something similar to a monthly cycle? Even her, the immortal warrior queen? Shirou had a blank expression on his face, but suddenly his expression changed. He spoke through gritted teeth, his anger palpable, "Emi ya Kiritsugu." In the next moment, boom! A deafening sound like thunder echoed through the rental room as an inferno erupted, instantly engulfing the peaceful night in chaos and sparks. The flames burned and boiled, creating a sea of fire that seemed to consume all life in its path. Emi ya Kiritsugu stood at a distance from the remains of the caster workshop, which had been reduced to rubble by the C4 bomb. He took a cigarette from his mouth, tossed it to the ground and crushed it underfoot. The people around him were panicked and shouting, but he remained calm and collected, with an expression of detachment, as if he were from another world entirely. He walked away with a steady gait. Chapter 37, C37. Waver furiously grabbed hold of Iskandar's cloak and yelled, "You bastard! How dare you make me lose face in front of so many people? You need to understand, I am the master." Iskandar scratched his ear with his thumb, feeling irritated by Waver's constant nagging since he left the stage. Repeating the same phrase over and over made Iskandar's ears almost numb. He grabbed hold of Waver's sleeve and lifted him high, staring at him with a pair of tiger-like eyes. Waver held the book tightly in his hands, feeling a bit scared as he saw Iskandar lifting him high. He stammered, What are you doing? You want to kill your master." Compared to his height and physique, Iskandar truly had a more commanding presence. Waver, trying to assert himself, said with a fierce tone, You shouldn't forget, I have a command seal." Iskandar dismissed his noble phantasm and stood on the ground. With a firm clap sound, he threw Waver onto the ground. He looked at Waver and said, "You arrogant guy, always talking non-stop. Is the reason you're participating in this war only to prove your own worth?" As Waver lay on the ground, he turned over and gazed upon Iskandar's serious expression. A feeling of unease washed over him, but he pushed it aside and asked, "So what? Do you want to teach me a lesson?" Iskandar, the king of conquerors, looked at Waver with a confused expression and said, "I am not a teacher. I have no interest in teaching you. I find it strange, with so many magnificent mountains and rivers waiting for you to explore and conquer, why do you limit yourself to such a small world? Don't you find it too narrow and suffocating?" Waver sat up, looking at Iskandar with determination in his eyes, "So you still want to teach me a lesson? You don't understand. What small world? That's my whole world. I am a magus. Changing the meaningless aristocratic bloodline theory, to be a great magus praised and remembered by the world is my wish." Waver raised his hand and revealed his command seal, "Do you still want to teach me? Do you want to experience the small world you mentioned and see how much restraint it has on you? If you have a wish, if you're afraid to leave early, then listen to me, listen to your master. Understand your own position." Iskandar remained silent. He looked down at Waver, this awkward, arrogant, and high-spirited teenager who was bound by a small world. It was like throwing a frog into a well, only able to see the narrow sky above, but unaware of the vastness of the universe. Suddenly, boom! A massive explosion erupted in the distance, the firelight casting an eerie glow on Iskandar and Waver's profiles. Iskandar moved closer to Waver, and Waver felt a twinge of fear, but his arrogant spirit would not allow him to be dominated by his own servant. Iskandar grabbed Waver's collar, holding him like a small wildcat, and stared at him for a long time. He then smiled, showing his white teeth, and spoke in a very serious tone, "The only thing that this king fear is that these legs will not reach the end of the starry sea. Do you understand? How small is the world inside your heart? Is that all you have to say, rider? Are you simply trying to mock me? I will use my command seal to teach you a lesson." "A servant should never talk back to their master," Waver shouted, baring his teeth and claws as he reached out to grab Iskandar's beard. Iskandar laughed, unfazed. "Go ahead, but the first night hasn't ended yet," he said. With a swift motion, he summoned his noble phantasm once more and rode the thunder, passing through the sky. "You son of a bitch! Listen to me for a moment. Don't grab me like this, it's too embarrassing," shouted Waver, struggling against Iskandar's grasp. Do you hear me? It's too embarrassing. Ha ha ha. Iskandar let out a burst of indifferent laughter as Waver's tears and the sound of his shattered self-esteem echoed through the sky. Kiritsugu is a complex individual, he is a good person, but at the same time, he can also be considered a dirty one. He is highly idealistic, but that also causes him to be more desperate. His dream is simple, he genuinely wishes for the happiness of all people in the world, nothing more. There is nothing inherently wrong with Kiritsugu's wish for peace in the world and for everyone to be happy. It is beautiful and innocent wish that many children have held in their hearts, but give up on as they learn about the harsh realities of the world. Persisting on this ideal can be difficult, but Kiritsugu chooses to hold on to this childlike dream, despite the challenges it presents. Kiritsugu is a magus and a good person, but his methods are ruthless and his moral boundaries are non-existent. He will use any means necessary to achieve his goals, and his initial good intentions cannot change that. The Einsborn family's assistance in summoning the legendary King of Knights did not fill him with excitement or honor, instead, it made him feel extremely angry and helpless. He was angry that the legendary king, who was said to bear the fate of a country, was just a girl. It went against his sense of justice that the fate of a country should be placed on a girl's shoulders. On the other hand, he was helpless because the Night King, who was known for her glory and righteousness, was incompatible with his own methods and beliefs. Kiritsugu held firm to his beliefs in realism and regularly carried out tactical simulations to eliminate any illusions from his mind. As a result, his methods, while effective, were perceived as evil by the world. On the other hand, the Night King was a staunch advocate of chivalry and believed in facing opponents directly, relying solely on brute strength to overcome them. This approach was incompatible with Kiritsugu's methods. Despite his admiration for the Night King's righteousness and his desire for a world filled with more kind-hearted individuals, Kiritsugu found himself at odds with the Night King's approach. As a result, he divided his troops, with Iris Veil leading the charge in a direct attack against the enemy, while Kiritsugu took charge of secretly ambushing them. However, while Kiritsugu was lying in wait in a warehouse area, ready to use a sniper rifle to kill Kenneth and Waver, he was exposed by Shirou. Though he realized he couldn't act recklessly now that he had been discovered, he was still somewhat annoyed that his plan had been foiled by Castor. But the series of actions that Castor took next made Kiritsugu's mood solemn. In the warehouse area, Castor revealed Lancer's true name and then gradually launched a psychological attack, ultimately forcing Kiritsugu to retreat. To be honest, Castor is the servant that Kiritsugu likes the most and also has the best compatibility with. However, Castor is an enemy and so Kiritsugu must eliminate him early. Compared to the bright and idealistic heroes, Kiritsugu believed that servants who were more grounded in reality, like himself, were the most difficult opponents to deal with. If given the choice, he would eliminate them as soon as possible. There was no chance originally. However, Castor made a crucial mistake by not switching to a spiritual body, providing Kiritsugu with an opportunity to strike. Despite his suspicions that Castor had ulterior motives and was possibly trying to lure him into a trap, Emiya Kiritsugu made the decision to proceed with his plan. Yes. Emiya Kiritsugu, a master assassin, typically operated in secrecy. However, he possessed a remarkable level of courage. He tracked down Castor to his workshop and was taken aback to discover that the latter's workshop was in complete disarray and located in an isolated area outside of the residential zone. In response, Kiritsugu decided to destroy Castor's workshop using C4 explosives. As he stood a distance away from the rubble, Emiya Kiritsugu thought to himself that Castor and his master should be buried there together. However, just as he had this thought, two figures emerged from the fiery inferno. Kiritsugu stood on the street, lighting a cigarette in silence. He then spoke into the earpiece next to his ear. "Did you see it?" "I saw it," came the response from the other end of the earpiece. Kiritsugu asked, "Can your eyes keep up?" "I can." "Castor is not fast," the person on the other end replied. "The person on Castor's back should be his master. Don't aim for the head, just hit the body and use the origin bullet to take him out," Kiritsugu instructed. "I understand, Kiritsugu," came the reply. With no further communication from the other end of the headset, Kiritsugu spat out his cigarette and his face became as calm as the Dead Sea, as if reality had dulled all of his emotions. But was it not the fate of all humanity? To be forged in the fires of life, sharp-angled stones honed by each and every trial. But with each passing day, the edges softened, chipped away by the relentless hammer of reality. Until they were nothing but smooth, rounded pebbles, forever changed by the journey. Cough cough cough. Kiritsugu heard the sound of a young girl beside him, pinching her nose and trying to wave away the smoke coming from his cigarette. He quickly extinguished his cigarette by crushing it underfoot. He then picked up the remains and disposed of them in the trash can nearby. Wrapping his coat tightly around himself, Kiritsugu turned and walked away. The autumn wind was bleak and cold, biting at his skin as he stepped out into the open. Chapter 38, C38. Damn it! Shirou cursed under his breath. He couldn't believe Kiritsugu had targeted him instead of Kanath. If Scathatch hadn't warned him, Shirou would have been caught in a deadly inferno while asleep. Unlike other servants, he lacked the ability to spiritualize, and his physical body would have been consumed by the flames, killing him. Thanks to Scathaka's warning, Shirou was able to act quickly and use his command seals. He invoked an ambiguous command, "Let caster escape from death," to get a large amount of magical power. He then projected Roaias, the 7 rings that cover the burning heavens, a powerful barrier that blocked the explosion and collapse of the house. With the help of this barrier, he was able to escape with the unconscious Ryu Unosuk. Ryu Unosuk had already become a substitute sacrifice in Shirou's plan, but his death here would render the plan pointless. Shirou quickly grabbed Ryu Unosuk and ran as fast as he could, but his eyes narrowed as he felt like he was being watched by many eyes. Some of these eyes seemed to be filled with malice, while others had unknown intentions, whether they were hidden or out in the open. Damn it! Are they all after me? Shirou cursed to himself as he continued to run. He had gathered enough information to proceed with his plan, but the problem was that many people were targeting him, wanting his life even before dawn. I can't die here. Shirou gritted his teeth and pushed on. As long as he could hold out until dawn, he could take the initiative and carry out his plan, instead of being on the defensive as he was now. However, Shirou was unaware that one of the sets of eyes watching him belonged to a sniper, whose rifle was aimed at Ryu Unosuk, who was being carried by Shirou. The sniper was positioned on the 7th floor of an unfinished residential building, and with just one pull of the trigger, bang, Ryu Unosuk's head would explode. However, whoosh, 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 7 black keys sliced through the night sky, their cold light aimed at the sniper, Miri. She is Kiritsugu's assistant, with a wealth of experience in bounty hunting and combat. She quickly rolled to avoid the deadly black keys. Glancing up, she saw the person who had fired them. It was a priest dressed in a dark blue clerical outfit. Mi remembered that this man was called Kairai. He was once a disciple of Tokiomi, but since he was also chosen by the Holy Grail War, he broke away from Tokiomi. Kairai's tone was filled with overwhelming emotions as he asked, "Tell me, where is Kiritsugu?" Mie, sensing danger from Kairai, naturally kept Kiritsugu's whereabouts a secret. With a squint of her eyes, she quickly pulled out a hand grenade from behind and hurled it toward Kairai. As the hand grenade flew towards him, Kairai stretched out his palm and threw black keys to intercept it. But at the moment the black keys pierced the grenade, a blinding whoosh of light forced Kairai to close his eyes. Seizing the opportunity, Mia quickly escaped. Over there! Shirou, running at full speed, spotted the light on the tall building and his gaze turned cold. He didn't hold any ill will towards anyone, but someone was trying to kill him. So, he had no reason to show mercy. Raising his hand, he used the remaining magic power of the command seal to project 18 sharp swords that flew toward the building like a hailstorm of death. Boom, boom, boom. The swords collided with the building in a deafening roar, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air as the structure shook from the impact. With a series of fiery explosions, the blades tore through the walls and windows, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Something's coming. It's dangerous. Blinded by the intense light, Kairai's senses alerted him to danger and he dodged the swords Shirou had shot at him, like a martial arts master. However, he is still immortal and was unable to avoid one of the swords, that pierced through his right arm with a splash sound. Pain and blood flowed from the wound. With his injury, Kairai dared not to linger and escaped, relying on his memory of the way he had come. As he ran, he contacted the assassin who was keeping watch on Shirou and others. "What's the situation? Have you taken action against Caster's master yet?" The assassin replied, "Not yet. The situation is too chaotic for us to move. Caster is on high alert, we need to wait until he relaxes his guard before moving in for assassination." "Is that so? Then I'll leave it in your hands. Remember, teacher is still waiting for an answer." Kairai closed his eyes, replaying his hasty retreat in his mind. Wait, my lord. The master of this caster seems to be different from the information provided by Tokiomi. He's not a 6-year-old child, but a young man. Can you confirm that he is the master? Kairi asked. Yes, I have confirmed the presence of seals on the back of his hand and the strong magical aura. It feels a bit unusual. But caster's aura is strange as well, so it's not surprising. He is definitely a master and a magus. Assassin replied confidently. Then go and kill him. He must be caster's master. Kairi remembered Tokiomi's nature and gave the order with confidence. He knew that Tokiomi was skilled at making strategic preparations, but at critical moments, small details like this would be overlooked for no apparent reason. Shaking his head, Kairi raced back to the holy church. He had left without Tokiomi's knowledge, and now he needed treatment for his injury. As Shirou ran for his life, the feeling of being watched only intensified. He could sense a strong intent to fight closing in on him and his heart sank. He knew that if he didn't shake off his pursuer, he might not survive to see the light of dawn. Shirou had been running for what felt like an eternity, but the figure chasing him was relentless. Like a flash of deep green lightning, a red spear streaked across the night sky and nearly struck Shirou's next step, forcing him to stop and turn to face his pursuer. Caster, we meet again. The chaser holding a yellow short spear smiled at Shirou a little bit reluctantly. But Shirou couldn't bring himself to smile back. The person blocking his way was none other than Dire Muid of the Love Spot. Taking a deep breath, Shirou tried to steady his voice as he asked, "Are you all joining together to attack me? Have I become such a formidable opponent that you need to come at me in numbers?" "Just the opposite," Dire Muid replied, his tone serious. "I don't feel scared at all. My heart is filled with the determination to defeat you." "Then why are you acting with others?" Shirou questioned Dire Muid. "Because it is the command of the Lord," Dire Muid replied with a mix of shame and determination in his voice. Shirou questioned Dire Muid again, "What about the honor of being a knight? Are you just going to follow your lord's command without thinking about it?" Dire Muid replied to Caster, his face filled with shame but his tone resolute. "Caster, I am a knight, my purpose is to bring victory for the Lord. My heart is firm, it will not waver even in front of Lord Fionn." Shirou sneered and spoke to Dire Muid, "It won't waver? You are a person without etiquette or shame. How dare you call yourself a knight in front of me? A true knight would have destroyed his own face upon descent, eliminating the curse that plagues him. But you cannot even do this. So tell me, what right do you have to speak of your own glory in front of me?" Dire Muid agreed with Shirou's words, "What you said is right, I didn't think of that. This is exactly what I am lacking." Dire Muid's face was solemn as he raised his gi-bit-he, a yellow spear that causes an irreversible injury. With a slash, he marred his own appearance, especially the mark caused by the curse etched into his skin. Despite this, Dire Muid's eyes still shone as he fixed his gaze on Shirou. Any sudden movement from Shirou would be met with a fierce attack. As Dire Muid resolutely carried out his own resolution, Shirou's eyes twitched unconsciously. The act of self-harm, just to showcase one's glory and determination, was something that he found hard to understand. These heroes from myths and ancient times were all crazy. Shirou tried to speak but found himself at a loss for words. Dire Muid's determination had become unshakable, and there was no way for words to break through his resolve. With a face full of blood stains, Dire Muid took an attacking stance and said to Caster, "It's time to decide the victory or defeat, Caster. My lord has commanded me to take your head." Shirou raised his palm and summoned multiple swords. With his A-level agility attribute, Dire Muid charged toward Shirou, moving through the rain of swords like a blue lightning bolt. He was quick and nimble, deftly dodging and deflecting each sword with his short spear. The sound of clashing metal filled the air as he made his way closer and closer to Shirou, his intent to engage in close combat clear. As Dire Muid approached, Shirou remained calm. After all, he had been killed by a stronger spear over 400 times. Though he was just an ordinary person without any special powers, the repetition of those deaths had made him somewhat resistant to spears. Especially to this move which had ended his life more than 200 times with the spear's killing technique. Scat Hatch, frustrated with Shirou's lack of progress, had personally taught him how to counter this move using a sword. However, despite her instruction, he still died over 200 times in her hands. But, facing Dire Muid's move, he felt confident. Because Dire Muid sensed danger and quickly looked behind, only to see a sword darting towards him, intercepting the deadly yellow rose, gliding along the spear like a serpent. With a snap sound, a not too deep, not too shallow wound appeared on Dire Muid's right underarm. How did you? Dire Muid was surprised. A caster not only has the skill to wield a sword in melee but also knows how to break his killing technique. Because, Shirou lowered his sword and said, I was trained by the world's strongest spearmen. Day after day, I was stabbed to death by spears dozens of times. Is that so? Dire Muid said, his voice tinged with surprise. It seems that even a lowly one like you has a good friend. But, don't you fear my direct attack just now? This is a gamble. If you win, I die. If I win, I bought myself a bit of time. You're too crazy! Dire Muid exclaimed, holding the wound. Despite thinking that Shirou was a person without a bottom line, Dire Muid couldn't help but be impressed by his courage to use his life as a gamble. Crazy? This is out of desperation. Everyone can see the madness on the surface, but who knows the pain in the heart? While Dire Muid was busy deflecting the sword rain, Shirou sneaked into a nearby residential area. Dire Muid, what were you thinking by daring to play around with me like this? Kenneth said coldly. Chase him now. If we cannot eliminate this caster even with our combined forces tonight, it will bring shame to the El Meloi faction. Yes. Dire Muid pulled the crimson rose of exorcism from the ground and chased after Shirou. Chapter 39, C39. Shirou rushed into the densely populated residential area made up of apartment buildings, shouting at the top of his voice, robbery. Arson. Terrorists with knives going door to door killing people. Killing all the men and stripping all the women. Kiritsugu's bombing had already roused some of the residents in the area, but Shirou's loud yell caused almost all of them to wake up. They flipped on their lights and headed to their front doors to investigate the source of the commotion below. As the bright lights flooded the area, the residents were startled by the sudden appearance of Dire Muid, dressed as an ancient warrior. Panic and confusion spread among them as they caught sight of him. Dire Muid, equally stunned, had never encountered such a situation before. Despite his limited understanding of the modern world, he instinctively realized that it was not a good sign and decided to take cover behind a tree, temporarily disappearing into a spirit form. He couldn't help but feel frustration towards Shirou. Despite this, he couldn't deny that Shirou's actions had effectively stopped him. Suddenly, Dire Muid furrowed his brows, his mind racing as he tried to piece together what had happened. The servant's aura has faded, he thought to himself. Has Caster already escaped? In reality, Shirou had just arrived in the residential area, waking up the nearby residents, and then quickly hiding himself in a nearby shrubbery. He released his Saint Graph, which is equivalent to a normal servant's spirit form, effectively lowering his servant's aura signature to a minimum. The unique aura signature that comes with the Saint Graph cannot be completely eliminated. However, by releasing the fusion, Shirou was able to greatly reduce its presence, making it difficult to detect his abnormality without the aid of special eyes like Gilgamesh's or sensitivity to auras. However, Shirou did not act recklessly. He had managed to achieve a slight advantage in the recent battle mainly due to the fact that Scathatch had killed him repeatedly and simulated various methods of breaking her technique hundreds of times. As a result, he had a basic understanding of how to counter it. Knowing how to counter a technique is one thing, but actually being able to execute it is another. Shirou had been able to take Dire Muid by surprise and launch a successful sneak attack due to Dire Muid's underestimation and lack of knowledge about Shirou's ability to crack his move. However, this also meant that Dire Muid would no longer underestimate Shirou, eliminating any further opportunities for close combat. By alerting the surrounding residents and forcing Dire Muid to be cautious about being discovered, Shirou had temporarily evaded him. However, once the residents returned to their homes and no longer felt any sense of danger, Dire Muid would likely launch a widespread search for him. By that time, he may be exposed. With that in mind, Shirou knew that before the residents returned inside, he needed to drive Dire Muid away. But how? His mind raced as he struggled to find a solution. Suddenly, an idea came to him and he furrowed his brows, biting his thumbnail with a look of distress. A determined gaze flickered across his face as he realized that facing these heroes head-on was not something he could do. My only option is to take a chance, he thought to himself. I need to go all in and take a risk. He clenched his fists under his black cloak, wondering why he was so protective of his life yet had to risk it for a glimmer of hope. The irony of the situation was not lost on him, but he knew it had to be done. Doing nothing was a death sentence and taking action may still lead to his demise, but it was a risk he had to take to improve his odds. One can only risk their life to alter a possibility. Taking a deep breath, Shirou felt the adrenaline in his body continues to surge since the explosion. His body was now in a state of heightened alertness and so was his mind. He knew that he had to stay composed. The more agitated you are, the closer you are to death. Battle is a gamble with one's life, and a gambler cannot afford not to take risks. As the noises of the surrounding residents gradually quieted down and they started to retire to their homes, Shirou knew that his time was running out. Instead of using his Saint Graph fusion, he activated his 27 underdeveloped magic circuits within his body and projected a conventional sword. He then hurled it with force toward a nearby intersection. The sword hit the wall with a loud clang, bounced back and fell to the ground, making a loud clanging sound. Where was that coming from? Dire Muid's gaze shifted eastward, where the walls of the residential buildings blocked his view and made it difficult to see clearly. However, the sound had definitely originated from that direction. As he walked towards the source of the sound, he suddenly heard the sound of a sword hitting something from behind him. Not only that, but the sounds of sword impacts echoed in all directions. Clang clang. Dire Muid became highly vigilant. Without searching skills, he was unable to detect Shirou's presence, which was Shirou's greatest advantage. The complex terrain of the residential area and the residents' presence outside provided Shirou with the perfect cover. Although Dire Muid couldn't detect Shirou's presence, Shirou was aware of Dire Muid's every move, giving him the upper hand as the enemy was visible to him while he remained hidden. Dire Muid was on high alert, not wanting to let Shirou escape again. As a true warrior, he wouldn't make the same mistake twice. He had let Shirou go before because he wasn't aware that Shirou, as a caster, could break his move. But now, he was fully aware of Shirou's abilities and taking notice. Given the unusual circumstances, Dire Muid knew that if he let his guard down, all the years he spent perfecting his combat skills would be in vain. Despite his extensive experience, he had never encountered such a cunning and deceitful opponent. A knight's battles usually involved a direct confrontation, so this enemy's strategy of evasion was particularly puzzling for him. Suddenly, Shirou's servant aura flared, and a sword was hurled toward Dire Muid without warning. Reacting quickly, Dire Muid brought his two spears together in front of him, forming an X shape, effectively blocking the incoming weapon. If that's the best you can do with your sneak attack, it's futile. No need to even try, Dire Muid said confidently. But, an unexpected event took place. The blocked sword suddenly released a silver needle, aimed directly at Dire Muid's eyes. It became clear that the sword was not a sword at all, but a hidden weapon crafted through the combination of projection and item creation. The true killing move was not the sword, but the needle. Despite this, Dire Muid remained unfazed. He opened his mouth and intercepted the needle headed straight for him with his teeth, biting down on it. Feeling a sense of relief wash over him, Dire Muid was about to expel the needle from his mouth and scold Shirou for his underhanded tactics. However, in that moment, a tiny silver needle shot out from the needle he was biting and aimed straight for his throat, targeting his tonsils. The piercing sound of the needle resounded in Dire Muid's head as he realized that all of the distractions, such as the long sword and the initial needle, were mere decoys. This small silver needle was the real killing blow. A trap within a trap, with yet another trap within. Who could have possibly anticipated such a layered deception? Clang! Although the small silver needle was not powerful enough to inflict serious harm on a servant's sturdy body and barely even penetrated Dire Muid's tonsils, it elicited only a mild sensation. However, Shirou had already achieved his objective. Broken Phantasm. In an instant, the Magecraft that powered the long sword, initial needle, and small silver needle all activated simultaneously. Boom! Lancer's formidable resistance to Magecraft shielded him from the ordinary longsword's broken phantasm, rendering it unable to cause harm. But the sudden detonation of the silver needle in his mouth caused Dire Muid to experience searing pain and black smoke to come out from his mouth. Dire Muid seethed with rage and embarrassment as he lifted his spear and charged after the source of Shirou's presence. However, by the time Dire Muid set off in pursuit, Shirou had already dissolved his Saint Graph and managed to make his escape by fleeing in the opposite direction. Shirou outwitted Dire Muid by simply running away. As he reflected on this outcome, he realized that the greatest advantage a modern man has over a heroic spirit might be the ability to think creatively and without any sense of shame. With this realization, Shirou shook his head, dismissing any unnecessary thoughts, and made his way to an abandoned factory in the suburbs as a temporary hideout. With a fatigued expression, Shirou cast aside Reinashuk and leaned against a stone pillar, staring at the crimson, fiery clouds on the horizon. A relieved smile spread across his face, knowing that the long night had finally come to an end. He could now take a much-needed break. He removed his black cloak and leather outfit, hiding them in a bucket. Removing his gloves, he gazed at the command seal that was missing one strike. When he first received the command seals, Shirou had considered using all of them to attempt to withdraw from the Holy Grail War. However, he was uncertain about the consequences, as it is uncommon for a master to participate in the war. If he failed to withdraw, he would be at a disadvantage with poor attributes, poor physical condition, limited information, and a huge disadvantage of not having command seals. After careful consideration, he decided to keep the command seals for the time being and planned to avoid Fuyuki City, in hopes of using them to withdraw from the war later. However, he was eventually forced to participate in the Holy Grail War by Gilgamesh and abandoned this idea. In the end, one of the command seals ended up saving his life. It was fortunate that he didn't act impulsively at that time. Shirou put on his gloves, then leaned against the stone pillar and fell asleep. Without the disguise, he looked like an ordinary 6-year-old boy. Even if he were to encounter other participants, it was unlikely that they would connect him to the infamous caster who had been attacking people's hearts. Furthermore, the long night had passed, and dawn had arrived. The red sun was rising from the east, and the world now belonged to mortals. There shouldn't be any more disturbances, right? However. Why? The assassin lay on the ground, pierced by swords, his life slowly slipping away. As per his master's command, assassin used presence concealment and followed caster and lancer who were yet unaware of his presence, only to be surprised to find that caster's true form was that of a common 6-year-old child. Thus, assassin understood. He understood the source of caster's peculiar aura. The opponent was an existence similar to a servant, an ordinary child who had fused with the Saint Graph. The information provided by Tokiomi was accurate, but the format was different. Assassin was in the process of stealthily infiltrating to murder the tired and slumbering child, but he was ambushed instead. Why? Why? He asked, bewildered and perplexed. He tried to lift his head and gazed upon the Golden King, who looked divine in the brilliant light of the sun and moon. You aren't you on our side? Instead of a response, he was met with a sword that impaled his skull, accompanied by a disdainful voice. Humph. Chapter 40, C40. The fog was thick and the surrounding was deathly silent. Shirou found himself in a dreamlike shadow world, staring at a serene woman who was smiling at him like an elder sister. Scat Hatch, unlike before, didn't immediately attack him but stood before him with a smile on her face. Could it be some kind of conspiracy? Shirou became alert. It seems you want me to stab you a few times, Scat Hatch said as she stood up. No no no. I never said that. Shirou quickly denied her statement. Real life is already tough enough, let's not make things complicated in the dream. He then had a realization, wait, do you have mind-reading abilities? Can you read my thoughts? I don't have mind-reading abilities, it's just wisdom that comes with age, Scat Hatch said with a smile. Shirou gave a weird expression, he thought to himself, you live and learn. He decided he wouldn't repeat the same mistake and make fun of her. A demi-servant wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Scat Hatch walked over and ruffled Shirou's hair. You did well today, for a mortal. She said, so let's save today's training for next time. Shirou was surprised, but then he smiled bitterly. He realized that this woman who had invaded his dream could indeed see what was happening in the real world. But please train me. I beg you. Shirou earnestly pleaded. Oh? Not afraid of getting hurt this time. Shirou replied with a serious expression, I used to think that with war approaching, training was just a waste of time and energy and had no meaning. But after thinking about it, I realize that I am still too young. If it weren't for my Shisho's constant training, I might have died at Lancer's hands this time. Scat Hatch smiled at Shirou and remarked, you've matured a bit. Shirou's mouth twitched as he asked, was I that immature before? Yes, you still behave like a child when you're around your mentor, Scat Hatch chuckled. If acting like a child can make my Shisho appear in the real world, I'd do it forever, Shirou replied. That's not possible. Your story must be written by your own hand, Scat Hatch said with a warm smile as she raised her spear. So Shirou, be ready to feel the sting of my spear once again. I'd rather perish a few more times in my Shisho's hands than meet my demise in reality, Shirou declared as he summoned his swords with a determined expression. Then you'd best be prepared, Scathatch chuckled as she swiftly pierced the vigilant Shirou with her spear. After 37 deaths, Scathatch halted her attack. Have I reached my limit, Shisho? Shirou lay on the ground, struggling to catch his breath. Yes, Scathatch put down her spear and smiled as she replied. With great effort, Shirou sat up and looked at Scathatch with a serious expression. Scapegoat, since you have the ability to see the outside world, do you know why some servants refer to me as a traitor and then claim it's a misunderstanding? Don't you already have the answer within your own heart? Scathatch laughed, piercing through Shirou's words. Shirou felt slightly embarrassed. After all, this ancient being who has lived for countless years is not someone that a young man like him can deceive with rhetoric. Shirou laughed awkwardly. He retracts his previous statement. In front of such an elder sister, it's best not to think at all. The amount of knowledge and experience she has accumulated is far greater than what he could acquire in a lifetime. Is it the wisdom of mortals? Shirou tentatively asked. Perhaps, Scathatch smiled gracefully, without revealing any flaw in her expression. Shisho, Shirou sighed, can't you just tell me directly? You're acting like a child again, Scathatch smiled gently, shaking her head. Even if you behave this way, it's not possible for me to give you all the answers. I've completed my journey in this world, but you're still in the midst of yours. This is your own tale, and giving away all its secrets too easily would diminish the value of the journey you must undertake. I have no objections to leading a mundane life. My only aspiration is to attain wealth, to indulge in reading novels, and to voice my frustration with the weakness of the protagonists in those books. I don't want to be a character in a tale, with no assurance from the author that I won't meet an unfortunate end before the story concludes. No, even if the story doesn't end, there are still characters who are arranged to die by the author in the middle of the story. Shirou is distressed. The outcome of the play remains a mystery until it reaches its conclusion, Scathatch said, patting Shirou's head gently. Despite her reputation as a warrior, her touch was surprisingly gentle. And once you're on stage, there's no turning back, she added. Shirou, a mere child, found himself caught in the crossfire of a conflict between two powerful masters. One was a Magus killer who acted in the name of justice, while the other was a Magus from the clock tower. Despite Artoria and Dire Muid's moral convictions to cease fighting once Shirou revealed his true identity, these two masters would likely use their command seals to compel them to kill Shirou. Kiritsugu, despite his feelings, would not hesitate to shoot Shirou, even if it caused him great pain and mental anguish. Similarly, upon discovering that Shirou is just a child, the Magus Kanath would not be content with simply eliminating one servant prematurely, but would instead take pleasure in retrieving his corpse. Shirou, with his unique ability to fuse with a servant's Saint Graph, is considered a valuable research specimen by many. As a first-class lecturer in the clock tower, the allure of his existence is highly tempting to Kanath. Your face is scrunched up again, Scathatch noted, lowering her gaze to look at Shirou with a pair of crimson eyes. Okay, as your mentor, I'll give you one more piece of advice. What advice? Shirou asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. If you ever reach a point where you feel like you can no longer go on, head to the Greater Grail, Scathatch advised. Shirou furrowed his brow in confusion. What's the purpose of going there? Why, to come to my kingdom, of course, Scathatch replied with a graceful smile. As your mentor, I will be better equipped to keep you safe. Shirou. Shirou felt his heart growing heavy. The older sister's heart was already black, and he feared that continuing the conversation would cause him to have a heart attack. With a sad expression, Shirou tried to pull himself out of the dream, but as he turned to leave, his gaze fell upon the girl sitting on the other side of the sea of flowers. He couldn't bring himself to leave without expressing how he truly felt. Summoning all his courage, he looked at her with a serious expression and said, Scapegoat, in this lifetime, you are the number one in my heart. After saying that, Shirou fled the land of dreams. The number one in your heart. That won't do, Shirou. As your mentor, I am thoroughly a flawed person. If I were truly the number one in your world, then no one would be able to kill me. I eagerly await it, Shirou, for you to be the one to end my life. Scathatch spoke with a harmonious blend of sisterly warmth and the melancholic tone of a woman. She was filled with remorse and longing for her own demise. As the dream came to an end, the day began to brighten. Though the first night of the Holy Grail War had passed, there were still 6 more nights to endure. The endless, Long nights were filled with death, looming closer with each passing moment. Shirou felt a sense of determination as he clenched his fist. I have to do something. He understood that with just his basic skills, he would not survive the Holy Grail War. The previous night's battle had made that clear. He needed to take action. Shirou knew that his face-to-face battles with the righteous servants could only be won by gambling on his life. However, he couldn't help but wonder how long he could keep this up. Even if he managed to avoid all the battles and win the gamble, he would still have to face the strongest servant to determine the winner. This thought filled him with dread. It was not a favorable outcome. Definitely not good. Shirou knew that with his weak attribute, continuing down this path would ultimately lead to his death. He had to take action and change the course of the situation in a way that would benefit him. He had to find a way to gain the upper hand and steer it in his favor. Shirou got out of bed and looked at the sun that was slowly rising on the horizon. He tightened his small fist and said to himself, the night may be their battlefield, but the dawn belongs to me. He was determined to use his advantage of being able to move in the day to his advantage and make it his home field. With this declaration, Shirou left the abandoned factory with a straight face. Shirou knew that Scathatch had already given him enough help, whether it was training him or reminding him to avoid explosions. He couldn't keep relying on her help, and if he continued to demand it, it could lead to her abandoning him. Though Scathatch didn't show it, anyone with knowledge of social interaction knew that constantly demanding was a sure way to ruin a friendship. Moreover, he and Scathatch had only interacted for a few days, and their relationship was not yet solidified. So in the end, the only person he could truly rely on was himself. Shirou let out a sigh. That's just how reality is, mountains will collapse, and people will leave. Characters in books who are always loyal and remain friends no matter what are a fantasy. In reality, all living beings are equal and everyone will eventually meet their end. No one is privileged by the world. Ultimately, Shirou must rely solely on himself, his own abilities and his intellect to endure in this conflict. He must have faith in his own skills and be self-sufficient in order to survive. However, Scathatch had also told him something before. This is your era, your city. This statement gave Shirou hope and made him think about how to deal with this war, where all his opponents were mythological killers. In this war, his edge was not his physical power, expertise in Magecraft, or even the modern firearms wielded by Kiritsugu. It was his mind, shaped by modern knowledge as a typical modern individual. So, when confronted with dangers he can't combat, what would a typical modern person do? A simple solution. Call the police. As he walked towards the police headquarters in Fuyuki City, he unexpectedly ran into two people he never wanted to encounter. Guinevere. You're Guinevere, right? The blonde girl in the black suit resembling a knight abruptly grasped Shirou's shoulder. Her bright blue eyes mirrored Shirou's face. Shirou's heart skipped a beat. The girl standing before him was none other than Artoria, the one who had vowed to end his life with her sword the previous night.
Thanks for listening.